بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، إخوة الإسلام عباد الله. I take great pleasure in being here this evening, Walillah alhamd, or tonight, Laylatul Jumu'ah, to have this open discussion with the brothers and sisters, and hopefully it'll be a shared discussion, meaning hopefully some of the brothers and sisters who want to come in and comment or add to the discussion will do so by the permission of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Of course, we would say if any sisters come in, we would encourage you to leave your cameras turned off for obvious reasons. Now, when dealing with this particular broadcast or live stream tonight, as advertised, we'll be dealing with the politics of Dawah here in the US. And what I want to do, I'm going to try to segment each portion of the discussion out, as there are three main things that will be discussed. One, the overall condition and or circumstance of the Muslims here in the US, or excuse me, before that, the overall condition of the people here in the US and the various thoughts and ideas that are floating throughout the society. It's very important for that to be comprehended. Second, will be the condition of the Muslims within the society. And third, will be the challenges that callers to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala face in the society. Those are the three main points or segments, but there are branch issues that are connected to these things. There are branch issues that are connected to these things. And so I'll leave the link in the comment section. And whenever we're dealing with a particular aspect or a particular discussion concerning the subject, whoever wants to enter and add their input to that particular thing can just come inside or enter the studio. And whenever I finish my commentary, then I'll add you into the feed in order for you to add your opinion or state your disapproval of something that is said and why, and thus forth and so on. The main point is that if you come in respectfully, recognize that this is something that I'm hosting, and you come in respectfully. It's okay to differ, but come in respectfully, Different is not really, having a difference of opinion with myself is not really an issue as far as I'm concerned. But what is an issue is coming in a disrespectful manner, acting in a way that's unbefitting of a Muslim to act. And so, when beginning this particular munaqasha, this particular discussion or conversation, and I think it's appropriate to start off with the statement of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. in where he says, "Woman ahsanu qawlan mimman da'a ila Allah wa amila salihan wa qala innani min al-muslimin." Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, he states, and who is more better? Who is more better in speech than whomsoever invites towards Allah and does righteous actions? And this type of person clearly states that undoubtedly or certainly I am from the Muslimin. I am from those that willfully submit, yani, to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Allah is saying, who is more better in speech than this type of person, a person that calls towards Allah or invites towards Allah. Now there are several things that need to be recognized when looking at this particular statement of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. First and foremost is that there is a question being asked, but this question signifies an established and firm negation. It signifies an established and or firm negation. In other words, it's negating that being the case. It's negating there being someone who is better in speech than he who calls to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala or invites to Allah. There's no one better in speech than this type of person. This type of person who calls an individual to actualize the very reason why Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala created him. As Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala teaches us, and this verse is well known to all of us, as it's oft repeated in the circles of knowledge and in the khutbah, and thus forth and so on, where Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, he states, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created jinn and mankind except but to worship me. And so it's clear from the statement of Allah or the question that it is establishing or it signifies an established and or firm negation as it relates to speech that is besides that. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ, there is no, and who is more better in speech than he who invites to Allah? There is no speech that is better than the speech of the one that is inviting towards the worship of Allah, the very purpose in which a person is, or the humanity was created. And when analyzing and looking at that, then we see the virtues of the da'i, of the one who invites to Allah, and we see the virtues of the da'wah, the invitation or propagation of this foundation in which humanity was created upon. That therein is virtue. Therein is virtue, and it is a means to raise the rank and the status of an individual, not necessarily with the people, but ultimately with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, especially if it is done in accordance with that which Allah loves and is pleased with, from inner statements and actions and outer. From inner and outer. And we'll get to that point when looking at this third point as it relates to this verse, and that being that the invitation is to Allah alone. The invitation is to Allah. The invitation is not to one's self. It's not to one's brand. It's not to one's hizb or party or group. It's not to one's sheikh or one's teacher. It's not to one's leader, like some people call to leaders of organizations. It's not the call to someone with influence within the society. It's not the call to any of these things. On the contrary, the call is to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the worship of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the exaltation of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the glorification of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This is what the call or the invitation is. The person who is receiving this invitation, this is what he's being called to. This is what he's being called to. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala teaches us in Surah Yusuf, Kul hadhihi sabili ad'u ila Allah ala basiratin ana wa man ittaba'ani. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, he teaches us when he commands the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to say, he gives a verbal command to say, this is my path. I call to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala upon what? Basira, yani sure knowledge. What's intended by basira here is yani knowledge, pure knowledge. A knowledge that's not tainted with ignorance. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has commanded the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to say this. This is my path. I call to Allah upon sheer knowledge. And then the verse continues, me and those that follow me. Me and those that follow me. Wa subhanallah wa ma ana min al-mushrikeen. And glorified is Allah, and I am not from amongst the idolaters. I am not from amongst the idolaters. In this particular verse in Surah Yusuf, Allah is commanding the Prophet ﷺ to say that he calls to Allah. The call is to the Lord of all that exists. This necessitates that a person has some type of ikhlas in his call. His call is not to himself. He's not inviting to himself. He's inviting to the worship of Allah. So this individual has some type of ikhlas. And this is a condition for the prerequisite of the validity of this act of worship that a person is doing. Because ad-da'wa ila Allah is an act of worship. Because we're commanded to do so, to enact this, for those that have the ability to do so. We're commanded to call to the worship of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And so there has to be some ikhlas, yani, of the heart. Al-ikhlas, which is normally translated as sincerity. But the reality of al-ikhlas, as Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymin, or rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, has stated in several of his authored works, he said, al-ikhlas huwa at-tanqiyya wal-muradu bihi. He stated that al-ikhlas, it is yani purification. It is purification. And what is intended by this, أن المرء لا يبتغي بعبادته إلا وجه الله. That an individual, he does not desire, he does not yearn for, he does not want, he does not intend by his acts of worship anything except the face of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, wal wusul, and the arrival at Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's paradise. This is the point and the purpose of why somebody makes this call. That he's calling or inviting to Allah outwardly and inwardly. As his heart, the intent behind the very reason why he's making this call is because he's desiring by way of it the face of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the entering into Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's paradise. And this is the intent of al-Ikhlas, it's purification, purifying the heart, purifying the intent from every type of blemish of idolatry. Thus the call is not to oneself, it's not to one's group, it's not to one's sheikh, it's not to one's teacher, it's not to one's country, it's not to any of these things. The call or the invitation is to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, not to the tribe, and thus forth and so on. This is one of the benefits that is taken away from this statement. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ لَا إِلَى النَّفْسِ وَلَا إِلَى حِزْبٍ وَلَا إِلَى شَخْصٍ. It's to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala upon basiratin, upon sure knowledge, upon sure knowledge, that the caller or one who invites to Allah, that he's not inviting to Allah based off ignorance as it relates to who Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is, or as it relates to what Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala loves, or as it relates to whom Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala loves. On the contrary, the inviter to the worship of Allah, he calls to Allah upon sure knowledge. And likewise, he has an understanding of the condition of the people to whom which he is making that call. To whom which he is making that call. And then in this verse in Surah Yusuf, thereafter, Allah is commanding the Prophet ﷺ to say, Ana wa man ittaba'ani, me and those that follow me. So followers of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ are those that invite to Allah, but not only do with ikhlas, but not only do they invite to Allah with ikhlas, but this invitation is built and based upon knowledge. It's built and based upon knowledge. And so it is not correct for anybody that is a follower of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to oppose this way, to put themselves in the realms of dawah while they are ignorant as it relates to what it is that they're calling to. And this is as it pertains to if it is a dawah tajdeed or a dawah ta'sis, because dawah is divided into two categories. The two categories that I just mentioned. At dawah at ta'sis, and this is the people who have surrendered and submitted to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala willfully and entered into al-Islam, calling those or inviting those who have yet to submit willfully to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala by worshiping Him alone and avoiding all false deities. That is at dawah ta'sis. At dawah tajdeed, it is those from amongst the Muslims who have the ability, who have understanding and clarity as it relates to the usul of the religion and matters of the furu', calling those who have submitted to Allah, to the worship of Allah, Tabaraka wa ta'ala, calling them to clarity as it relates to how this worship is enacted, calling them to clarity as it relates to whom it is they are directing their acts of worship to, and thus forth and so on. And thus forth and so on. And so I bring this verse and these points up as an introduction to the discussion that we're going to embark upon tonight. Because the issue and affair of dawah is a tremendous issue. It's a tremendous affair. And unfortunately or regrettably, in this day and time, because we're speaking about the US, we're not speaking about the UK, we're not speaking about a country where the people don't speak our language and are not a part of our culture. Their culture is different. Regardless of what they may look like, their culture and their circumstances are different. We're not speaking about an Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Mali or Burkina Faso or a Malaysia right now. We're speaking about the US. What is taking place in the US? And the reality is, when looking at the overall field of da'wah here in the US, then I believe brothers who are paying attention to the field of da'wah would agree with me when I say that there is some work that needs to be done in correcting a lot of things. And so this discussion tonight is going to be a discussion to try to analyze and scrutinize what's taking place, and not for the sake of complaining and pointing fingers and things of this nature, but we have to be solution oriented. And the solutions come from the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. If we implement this guidance, then it remedies whatever illnesses that are found amongst us. It remedies whatever illnesses that are found amongst us. So first and foremost, when looking at this particular discussion, and again, I'm going to put the link in the comments section once again. So whatever segment that we're dealing with, whoever wants to touch, add, or voice a difference of opinion or comment, and thus forth and so on, they could step in. And once I'm finished with what I'm saying, I'll add them to the discussion. And we'll keep doing that from point to point, inshallah. And again, all people are welcome to enter. All people are welcome to enter, again, as long as you come respectfully. So first and foremost, we want to deal with the current condition of the people in America today. And unfortunately, with this aspect of the discussion, I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers tonight, but to a certain degree, I really don't care because some of these things need to be said. One, there are some of the Muslims today, and I'll even be more specific, some from Ahlus Sunnah that move in a manner as if they're not looking at the reality of the condition of the people here in the States with both eyes open. And even some du'at move in a manner where they're living off of some folly, some some their thinking is engrossed in folly. They're not looking at the reality of what's going on over here. Because the reality is we are in Darul Kufr. The dominant thought and thinking is not in accordance with guidance, it's in accordance with kufr and shirk. This is the reality. We're in a country where its population is a little over 300 million people. 300 million people. And the customs and practices of shirk and kufr are dominant and apparent in this society. In this society. You don't have to look, you don't have to be hard pressed to find kufr, to find jahiliyyah, to find misguidance, to find shirkiyat. You're not hard pressed to find this in this particular society. This is very important for brothers and sisters to keep in mind because it should affect the way we as Muslims interact and deal with each other. There are places, even like where I'm at now, there are whole cities surrounding the city that I live in where you can't find not one masjid, not one. And when looking at this condition, I'd rather there be a tablighi masjid in some of these cities as opposed to what the current situation is. Because some Islam is better than no Islam. Some Islam is better than no Islam. I'd rather there be an Ash'ari masjid in some of these places than what the current situation is. Because, and whoever else that are considered from amongst the people of innovation, but yet their innovation does not take them out of Islam. We have to understand what they're upon is better than what we're seeing in this society of kufr and shirk. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us, Kitabun anzalnahu ilayka litukhrijan nas min adh-dhulumati ila an-nuri bi'idhni rabbihim ila siratil aziz al-hamid. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He states, and this is from Surah Ibrahim, a book that we have revealed to you, yani to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in order for you to extract mankind from the varying darknesses to the light. By the permission of your Lord, yani pulling them away from these darknesses towards the path of Al-Aziz and Al-Hamid. Yani Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Now notice that darkness is the in the Arabic language, the plural is used. The plural is used. Keep that in mind. Whereas when it comes to nur or light, the singular is used. The singular is used. Keep that in mind as I read the statement of al-Imam al-Shawkani, wa rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. Imam al-Shawkani, he states, لتخرجهم من ظلمات الكفر والجهل والضلال إلى نور الإيمان والعلم والهداية. He states the meaning of the statement, and extract them from the darknesses to the light, meaning extract them from the darkness of disbelief and ignorance and misguidance. Extracting them from that, taking them towards the light of faith, knowledge, and guidance. Now, and if we were to look at each darkness, a darkness as a different type of fikr or thought or understanding, then when looking at the condition of the majority of people in the US, we would have to admit, I can't say all, but we will have to admit that just about every single corrupt idea or corrupt theology or corrupt thought persuasion is found right here in the US. And they vary from perspective to perspective. But we have a theology of the Catholic, the theology of the Christian and all of its denominations, the theology of the Yahud and their various sects, the theology of Mormonism. Heck, we even have the theology of Satanism here in the US. There are people that claim to be Satanists here in the US. And then these ideas like liberalism and Republican-style conservatism. And other than that, from the isms and schisms that are here within the US. When we go into the Black community, and there are so many cults in the Black community, then we have different ideas, even some ideas claiming to be Islamic. But the theology and the ideology is a theology, an ideology of kufr and shirk. From the various different groups that are well known to us, from the 5% Nation, from the Moorish Science Temple, or whatever their name is, whatever their name is, to the NOI, to other than that. The point that I'm making is that figuratively or literally speaking, we are behind enemy lines in that regard. We're behind enemy lines in that regard. But the reason why I say this is because some from amongst the Muslims, generally speaking, and being even more specific, some amongst Ahlul Sunnah move throughout the society as if we have strength. And they apply certain things as if it is more of a maslahah to do this or to make this move or to say this publicly or to do this action, despite the fact that our true condition is other than how they're moving, and it's not producing the masalih that the Sharia encourages and calls to. And a lot of times it's because of a lack of looking at the condition and situation of what is taking place here in the U.S. with both eyes open. With both eyes open. Now, I'm being general right now, but that's right now. Eventually, there are going to be clear and explicit examples of what I'm talking about, so as not to be confused. No one will be confused what I meant, or what is he talking about? What does he mean here? Nah, we're going to get explicit here, inshallah. So this is one of the problems that some of the Muslims and callers are not looking at this situation with both eyes open. Another reality, regardless if a person likes it or not, the Muslims are barely making up 1% of the population here in the U.S. We're 3 point something million. Our population number is 3 point something million. Out of a people whose total population is a little over 300 million. So we're barely making 1%. We're barely making 1%. And so this is clear that we don't have the strength here. The customs and practices of al-Islam, the customs and practices of guidance is not clear and apparent throughout the society today. Sinfulness, transgression, and disobedience to Allah is what is obvious and apparent today. Sure, you may have a city like, for instance, Minneapolis, where the Muslims were smart enough, specifically our Somali brothers, were smart enough to target a city and move in that city. And now if you're living in that city, then you see the customs and practices of Islam a whole lot more open and apparent there than you would in the majority of cities all throughout the U.S. Similarly with Hamtramck in Michigan, the Yemenis and Bengalis and others targeted that city. And within that city, they're the dominant factor, or I don't want to say dominant factor, but the sha'air or the customs and practices of Islam are a whole lot more apparent than in the majority of other cities. The majority of other cities. So this is a point that needs to be emphasized. This is a point that needs to be recognized, because this is a point that will consequently have the Muslims strategizing and making moves a certain way that would actually produce benefit for the Muslims here. By accepting these simple truths. And here's another truth that people act like they don't recognize, is that 1% of the population of Muslims, what do you think that the population of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah is amongst that population? Do we make up even 1% of that 1% of Muslims in this population? And let me be clear what I'm saying when I say Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. I believe most of the brothers here who view my channel all understand what I'm saying. But yani, the Sunni, the Athari, amongst this population of Muslims, the adherent to the Hadith, to the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the follower of the ijma' of the companions. What's our number amongst that 1%? What's our number amongst that 1%? Sure, you may go to a place here and there, a masjid may have been given dawah for X amount of years, and so they have a big following. But that's that masjid. You may not even see that when you leave that neighborhood. You may not even see that when you leave that neighborhood. How many of masajid where there's thriving communities of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah? In fact, when I say communities, maybe I should change it to neighborhoods, where people just live all together in the same neighborhood. How many examples of that do you see that are upon the Sunnah here in the U.S.? And so we have to understand and face this simple reality that we are a minority amongst the minority. I don't believe that there has ever been any Athari, Salafi, Sunni conference that has ever pulled 30,000 people in one place. And if it has, it's because you have people coming from this city, that city, this city, and converging on that one place. But I'm talking about a major metropolitan city where it was a conference and 30,000 attendees were there. And these 30,000 attendees were from the immediate locality and the surrounding localities adjacent to that locality, not coming from across the country or coming from 2 states over or 3 states over or coming from Canada and thus forth and so on. Not that. Because regardless if we want to face facts or not, there are other groups of Muslims that are pulling those numbers. There are other groups of Muslims that are pulling those numbers. So this is the first thing that needs to be understood when looking at our condition and the condition of the Muslims, the overall condition of the people here in the U.S. and the condition of the Muslims. Now, and I'll get to the point of why I'm saying all of this when I start to deal with solutions. Another thing that has to be pointed out and needs to be emphasized. I just put the link in the comment section for anybody that wants to join the discussion. But another thing that needs to be pointed out is that because we are people here in the West, here in the U.S., we have cultural issues that we need to deal with. Every group of people has a culture. When you go to the Gulf states, their culture is generally the same. When you go to Egypt And now, first, before I continue, what do I mean by culture? And I have to say this because some of our brothers are ignorant as it relates to what is intended by culture. I have to say this. I had to check more than one person when I was in Yemen about this. And I find this crazy because the only people who think like this are people that claim to be Salafi. I've only heard this from Salafis, people claiming to be Salafi, that we don't have a culture. I've only heard this from people that claim to be upon the Sunnah. And this is an ignorant statement. Every people has a culture. The culture is dealing with your customs and your practices. So it's dealing with the type of foods you eat, the language that you speak, the way you dress. In some cases, religion. Religion as well enters into that. And thus for so on. All of these things make up culture. Like my mother, she used to say when I was a child, if I was out in public doing something that I know I wasn't supposed to do, she would say, after reprimanding me, she would say, you know, you were given better home training than that. That home training, that's a cultural thing. What we looked at as do's and don'ts, these are all cultural things. This is why, for this reason, we're commanded, for instance, to be dutiful to our parents. But there's no detail given in how this dutifulness is done. So this is when the principle kicks in, al-ada al-muhakkama, that your customs, your culture in this regard is now the judge as it relates to what dutifulness is. When it talks about being kind to for us men to be kind and treat our wives properly, our customs kick in as it relates to being a judge over what those things are. Everybody has them. Everybody has them. So that's the point. That's one point. That's a foundational point to get to what I'm about to say. There were some people that were attacked, Yasir Qadhi being one of them. Now we know the condition of Yasir Qadhi. This is not a defense of Yasir Qadhi, what I'm about to say. But just because somebody propagates batil doesn't mean that every time they open their mouth, they're incorrect. So I remember him making a statement where he stated, I believe it was him, I could be mistaken, and it's been some time, that we have challenges specific to our circumstance. We have cultural norms that are specific to us. And so a lot of challenges that we have in the US are specific to us and our overall circumstance. And Allah knows best if it was him that said that or somebody else, what they truly intended by that. But I'm not trying to play games with trying to decipher what people intend. The statement on the Dhar here is a truthful statement. There are situations taking place here in the US. There are circumstances here within the US that are specific to the US in comparison to the lands of the Muslims. That some of these things you won't find in the lands of the Muslims. And to illustrate this, I'll give an example of the universities here in the US. Culturally speaking, here in the US, going through elementary, junior high, and high school, culturally speaking, it's normal here in the U.S. that you have mixed gender schools, meaning classroom with males and females. I went to elementary school with males and females in the same classroom, junior high and high school. And I'm pretty sure everybody that's listening that's here in the US, with the exception of those that home studied, had the same experience. Had the same experience. Now, when you compare this to a Saudi Arabia or to a Qatar or somewhere else in the lands of the Muslims, you may not necessarily find that. You find them having a separation between the sexes in the school system, in the education system, and thus forth and so on. But here, culturally speaking, it's different. It's different. Now, why do I say this? Why am I bringing up this example? This is an example of one, as callers dealing with what's taking place over here, we now have to apply the principles that we learn, because we love to say principles over personalities. We love to say that. But a lot of times we find the people falling into personalities over principles. A lot of times we find that. But we have to use these principles that are found within the text or derived from the text of the Quran and the Sunnah in order to bring about a maslahah for the Muslims here within the US. And so when looking at, for instance, I did a video on this quite some time ago about studying at the universities. Now, if a person is able, based off the degree that they're trying to obtain, able to do so without having to physically step into any university, then that is what is most appropriate. That is what's most appropriate, without a doubt. But there are some subjects that one studies that he has to go to these universities. And now at this point, we have to apply certain principles when looking at these things. And so, like when I stated in the video, either there's a principle, إذا تزامحت المصلحة والمفسدة قدم رجاحهما. That if a maslaha and a mafsada إذا تزاحمت المصلحة والمفسدة, I believe I said it like that. If a maslaha and a mafsada are rivaling each other, meaning you're trying to achieve a good, but whatever the circumstance is in which you're trying to achieve that good is automatically coupled with what is referred to as a mafsada, normally translated as a harm or a con or whatever, or however it's translated with some of the people. There are some things, if you're trying to achieve this maslahah, it's going to be coupled with that. You can't get around it. They're coupled. Then give precedence to what is more preponderant. What is more preponderant? So if the maslahah is more preponderant, give precedence to that. If the mafsada is more preponderant, give precedence to that and abandon whatever it is that you're doing. But if the maslahah is more preponderant, although the mafsada is coupled with it, to proceed with what you're doing, or what you're doing. Right? So when it comes to universities where there may be both genders, you have a maslaha and a mafsada, because you have the mixed gender classes. It could be a means that could lead to something that may be prohibited by being in that type of environment. However, you have a maslaha. Why? Because this type of environment is temporal. It's only for a certain matter of time until you achieve a credential that you can take with you for the rest of your life, that enables you to be able to provide for yourself and a family, especially when looking at the circumstance of America today, where everything is going up and wages for people who are considered to be unskilled labor, wages are remaining exactly the same. And it may be that a person is not adequately able to provide for a family on some of these jobs that are considered to be unskilled labor. So the brothers who are understanding these principles have to weigh these things, when presenting to the people the option that they should or should not choose. But unfortunately, what we find happening is a lack of application of the principles, or an attempt to apply the principles but not examining the circumstance in its totality. That's one of the problems that is found. Likewise, another problem that is found is lack of insight and correct perception of the situation. And so people are saying and doing, and it doesn't produce the maslaha that Islam encourages. And then third, people are importing fatwa from scholars in certain places where a question was asked by a person of their locality about something going on in their locality, and then they import this fatwa and apply it here where there's a different circumstance. And there are examples of this. I remember one time it was some of my brothers that studied in Yemen with me will come back into the States and make an issue out of communities having a sadaqah box in it, and stating that the sadaqah box should be removed. And of course, we know that the asl is that there was no sadaqah box in the masajid or during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. That wasn't how sadaqah was collected. But when this issue reached some of the mashayikh who were given details as it relates to what's taking place over here, I remember one of the mashayikh clearly stated that if we were in Saudi, he would give the fatwa for it not to be applied or placed in the masajid here, there, excuse me. Due to what? Due to there being a ministry of Islamic affairs and endowments that takes care of the masajid. However, the circumstance in the U.S. is that there is nothing like that. The responsibility falls upon the community. And if the community doesn't step up and do it, the basic needs of the masjid will not be maintained. And it could consequently cause the doors of the masjid to be closed. And so this circumstance that we're facing here is unique in comparison to what's going on in Gulf states or Muslim countries. I believe just about every Muslim country has a Ministry of Islamic Affairs in it and Islamic and endowments. And so because of our circumstance, a different ruling was given. A different ruling was given. Despite the fact that some people weren't applying the principles and were trying to say that shouldn't be done and causing problems in certain places. Causing problems in certain places. This is because of a lack of implementing the principles that are found within, that are derived from the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, and having lack of foresight or insight. In other words, short-sightedness. And if people like that were followed, then the masalih that Islam encourages wouldn't be achieved. They won't be achieved. And there was somebody that stepped into the waiting room. I would encourage, I believe it said Abu Saliha. I would encourage Abu Saliha to come back in because I just wanted to finish what I was saying before I entered you into the discussion. But this is a very important point that has to be scrutinized. It has to be looked at. It has to be acknowledged, first and foremost. It has to be acknowledged. And because Abu Salih stepped out of the waiting room, I'm going to continue, inshallah. But before I continue, I'll put the link back in again for anybody that wants to step in. No. So that reality, we've faced waves of problems in the past we've faced waves of unnecessary problems because of this type of mentality. And the only cure for this, because I do believe that when a person opens their mouth, they expose themselves. Like Sheikh Fareed Abdullah used to say to us, when a person opens his mouth, he exposes himself. He exposes himself to be somebody of understanding of the text, or he exposes himself to be someone that has a misunderstanding of the text. Right? And so a question is being asked, are we allowed to join and ask questions? Lab best, inshallah, as long as it's on topic. Don't ask questions that send the whole conversation off topic, inshallah. So at any rate, these are things that we want to keep in mind. Now, moving along with the discussion, but something that also needs to be mentioned. But before I continue with that, because I dealt with importing, sometimes people import fatwa. Another thing that's done is sometimes scholars are asked questions about things that are going on over here, but they're not given the necessary detail that's needed in order for the scholar to perceive the situation in its totality as it relates to what's taking place over here. Then they get a fatwa and then they spread it. get a fatwa and spread it over here. And this is something that I've had many discussions with certain brothers involved in Dawah about, like, why wasn't this mentioned in this question or that question, or this was left out, or this was omitted, and thus forth and so on. And as a result, you're not really getting a thorough answer on the subject because vital details were left out to give the scholar better clarity as it relates to what was taking place. What was taking place in the situation, circumstance, or even as it relates to an individual. We've seen people go to scholars. We have a speak in a general manner without revealing an identity of a person. We have a brother over here, he's a da'i, he says this or he did that. And they oppose what is called dalala al-hamliya. Ad-dalala al-hamliya. Ad-dalala al-hamliya is basically if a person makes a statement that you observe what came before that statement and what came after that statement to properly contextualize the meaning of what the speaker was saying. Because sometimes you could take a portion of a person's statement and it alone, without what came before it and what came after it, can seem very problematic from the apparent of what is intended by it. But what came before and what came after it brings the contextualization needed for a scholar to properly understand what the person was saying and what the ruling is on the statement. So these are examples that we've lived through this. We've lived through this type of stuff. And I do believe that some of us have grown up. Some of us have moved past being hoodwinked and bamboozled by this type of activity, by Allah wa ta'ala's permission. Another important point. We're moving on with the discussion is that al-Islam here in the U.S., when you look at, and I want to first off, before I want to premise this before I say what I'm going to say. There's a different when we're dealing with culture and ethnicity. Culture and ethnicity are somewhat synonymous. When we're dealing with race, race means something else than culture or ethnicity. So culture or ethnicity is what I basically stated. Being from the same tribe, same language, same religion, same habits of behavior of what generally is considered to be acceptable or unacceptable in society, same food, and thus forth and so on. All this would be one's culture or a part of one's ethnicity. Race is dealing with outward appearance. Race is dealing with outward appearance. He's a black man, he's a white man, he's a this man, he's a that man. When it comes to Americans, and specifically black Americans have more in common than white Americans as it relates to ethnicity and or culture. We do, if you understand the difference. But a black American has more in common with a Haitian or a Nigerian or someone from Ghana or someone from Senegal as it relates to race, as it relates to outward appearance. Right? So I wanted to premise that with what I'm about to say. Islam, when it comes to America, this is a reality. There's no group of people, racially speaking, where Islam is spreading in communities where Islam is spreading more than within the black community. 49% of all new converts are black Americans. And that doesn't mean that 49% of all Muslims in America are Black Americans. That doesn't mean that. One of the statistics I saw, the total population of Black Americans that were Muslim here in the U.S. was about 28%. Another one I saw was 20%. And another one that I saw was 24%. White Americans accepting Islam, or that are Muslim, excuse me, unfortunately, you don't get an accurate statistic on it because they lump Middle Eastern Arabs into white, North African Muslims that are in the U.S. as white, and Persians and Iranians. They also lump them in as being white, and they say that makes up 41%. But culturally speaking, with us, we wouldn't consider any of them white. Culturally speaking, we'd say that all of those are people of color, culturally speaking. But for some reason, with the statistics, they label them as white, and that would be alone with white Americans. But the main point that I'm making, because when dealing with race, and especially here in America, you can't get around it. You can't get around it. This particular nation was built off of racial divide. So you really can't get around that. And for us to act like it's some type of secret or some type of subject that shouldn't be spoken on while living in society, then we would be doing a disservice, especially when in terms of dawah, Now, why do I say what I say? Islam is spreading in the Black community more so than in any other community. More so than in any other community. Now, one, Islam is for everybody. Black, white, whatever. Islam is for everybody. So the point that I'm about to make is not a discouragement to give dawah to everybody. But if we're dealing with business, you're going to put your money and invest your money in where you're seeing the most return at. And so there should be some type of focus. I think that's a bad word that I'm looking for. But there should be more initiative when given. I don't want to say that either, but there should be a major push within Black communities and dawah because of this reality. But it seems like in this day and time, that doesn't seem to be the case. That doesn't seem to be the case. Right now, when you're dealing with Black communities, you find, and this is a hujjah against the Muslims that are in Black communities, aslan first, that there has to be more of a push of calling people away from this clear and manifest misguidance that's all around us as soon as you walk out the door. This clear and manifest misguidance all around us as soon as we walk out the door. My neighbors, when Halloween came around, my neighbors, next house over, had all the type of spooky little ornaments on their front porch. A jack-o'-lantern and a figure of a witch and some fake little spider webs with a fake plastic spider. They had all the little spooky stuff on display. As soon as I step out my house and look over to my right, I see that stuff. So if we're thinking from a strategic perspective as Muslims, then we need to strategize and continue to put efforts in where we're statistically bearing fruit. Right? And again, this is not to say that there isn't any focus on any other communities, but it doesn't make sense that we would neglect a community where fruit is bared, and then focus, or not focus at all on any type of dawah whatsoever to anybody. But I see people who are involved in dawah, some of their videos, and they're in places where people are very argumentative. Now, I will say, again, I have to keep premising this because I don't want my statements to be misunderstood. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be in those places giving dawah, but some of the people that are giving dawah, and this is a different discussion that we'll eventually get to, should they even be the ones out there giving dawah? I seen a black Christian who has a channel on YouTube approach some brothers giving dawah, and he actually started bringing a hadith. He bought the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ stated, "Inna Allah la yanamu wa la yanbaghi lahu an yanama." That Allah does not sleep, and it's not befitting that he sleeps. To the point where the Prophet ﷺ, he stated, "Wa hijabuhu nur," and his veil is light, referring to Allah. And he totally confused the Muslim based off that statement about the veil. Does Allah limit himself? And he totally confused the Muslim. The Muslim wasn't even answering the question directly. He started running and ducking and dodging. And I'm sitting here like, it's clear that he doesn't know the answer. He should just say, I don't know. But why is he out there giving dawah? He doesn't even know he doesn't even have a basic understanding of who his Lord is. Because he should have been able to answer the question and squash what the Christian was trying to proclaim by using that hadith. But the main point that I'm making is there seems to be an abandonment in that regard, and nobody who does business is going to place his in in other than where he knows he's gonna see a return in. And that's the point that I'm making, a clear neglect. A clear neglect in that regard. Now, this one is going to be somewhat controversial to some, but it has to be said. It has to be said. Again, we're living in a society where there are racial divides amongst the non-Muslims. And sometimes we find this exhibited with some Muslims. I've experienced it, and there are others that have experienced it, right? And I have to say, me as a Muslim, a black person, a Muslim that happened to be born black in America, I do say, I can say undoubtedly, and this is a munkar that needs to be addressed, that I have felt shunned, and I'm speaking in general, not necessarily with people that are upon the Sunnah, but I have felt shunned while I enter some communities that are majority immigrant. Specifically, Indo-Pak communities, I've really felt like that. In fact, I remember when I first arrived in the city that I'm in now, just being truthful, the first thing I do is find, where's the masjid? I need to find a masjid to establish myself in the masjid. I found the masjid before I even found the place to stay. Walillahi alhamd. When I get to the masjid, it's majority Indo-Pak situation there. Well, of course, the imam was a Syrian. but everybody else was majority Indo-Pak. And these people were secular. These people were secular. They weren't religious. But these are the people that control that masjid. And when you're a part of a community, you know who is not from the community, who is and who's not, especially if you're a regular attendee of the masjid. So when I first started going to this particular masjid, you know, I was going there for Maghrib and Isha because I would be at work prior to Fajr, and when Fajr come in and Dhuhr and like this, I would be there. And in some cases, Asr. But I would be at the masjid for Maghrib and Isha, and I must have been there for 2 weeks. And nobody and never said anything to me. I would come in, nobody ever said anything to me. And I never thought anything of it. Until one day I stepped in there, and there were two brothers of the same ethnic background as the majority of the attendees. Now, coming to Maghrib, there'll only be about 7, 8 people, sometimes people less than that will be there. So this is why this was easy to notice. When we testinged out, the brothers that were there started treating two brothers who, now of course I didn't know these guys were travelers because I was new to that community. Started treating them with open arms. How's it going, brother? What's your name? Where are you from? Or you come to find out both these two individuals were traveling. And I'm sitting here in the Musalla, just prayed with these guys, been here for 2 weeks. Nobody ever said anything to me. These guys were there that day. Two different people going in two different directions happened to be traveling. And they started to extend help to these individuals. And the first thing I thought in my mind is, wow, I've been here for 2 weeks and nobody has ever said anything to me. Nobody has ever said anything to me. And obviously, these two people come out of nowhere and aid and assistance and open arms. They're getting open arm treatment and aid and assistance. And so, racism, racism, not racism, whatever. I'm not really even going into that. But I am saying that it was at that point that I felt like I was being shunned by the community. That I was being shunned by these people. I had been there for 2 weeks, and there was nothing of any type of welcome. Hey, brother, what's your name? Where you coming from? There was none of that. There was none of that took place. There was another situation in LA. I remember this happened. At one point, I was working for a Pakistani brother, and this guy was supposed to be upon the Sunnah. He was going to Sheikh Fareed Abdullah's classes, or excuse me, he attended the Masjid for Jumu'ah. Let me say it like this. The majority of the people in that community were predominantly Black American. So I remember it was at one point I worked for him. It was just for a brief duration. It was probably about 2 months, something like that. Needed a quick job, got with him, worked for 2 months, and then stopped and moved on to something else. But there was a white brother that was upon the Sunnah that attended, and mashallah, this brother was attending classes. I mean, like he was there every day, basically, the salawat classes like this. He started working for that same brother, the Pakistani brother that I'm mentioning. And some other brother after me, Black American, worked there, right? Now, the Black American brother ripped the Pakistani brother off. In some way, he stole something. I didn't get too into all that, right? But I remember the Pakistani brother come into the masjid, and I witnessed him talk to an elder brother in the community as he was waiting to talk to Sheikh Fareed. And this person said, every person that I employed from this community has ripped me off except brother so-and-so, referring to the white brother. I wasn't a part of the conversation, but I was within earshot and heard that. And I said to myself, I've never ripped this guy off. This is a gross exaggeration. Why would he say something like this? And when I worked for him, I never ripped him off. And I know of another brother who worked for him prior to me that was always one of the upright brothers, much more upright than myself. I'm just a poor, I'm someone that's miskeen. And I know he never ripped that person off. But why would he say this? I always looked at that strange. That why would he make a statement like that? And the predominant people in the community were all Black Americans that worked for him. Like, why would this stereotypical type statement that they thieves, they all thieves, and they'll be made by a brother, and this is factually incorrect. So the point that I'm making, racism, not racism, you figure. I'll let you figure that out. The point that I'm making is, when it comes to a lot of Black Muslims here in the U.S., it's starting to get to a point that we are feeling shunned by other communities. And in some cases, by people that claim to be upon the Sunnah. Now, I'm stating this because this is a munkar. This is a munkar amongst us. And I believe that a lot of people come to America with colonized minds. And my thing would be, leave that over there, wherever you came from. But if you came here on whatever it is that you were upon, and then you found the Sunnah, then we look at everything through the eyes of the Sunnah, not through the eyes of ignorant thought within the society. Not through the eyes of ignorant thought in the society. And this brings me to another subject, and I hope I don't lose any friends over this, but it's a munkar and it has to be stated. When dealing with the Somali community in terms of Black Americans, when dealing with the Somali community and Black Americans, there are certain Salafi Masajid that are predominantly Somali throughout the U.S. that are connected to one another. I'm not going to say the names of them, but they're connected to one another. And one of the things, when I, in my younger days, I used to try to, I was oblivious to a lot of this stuff, or maybe my eyes weren't allowing me to recognize things through reality. Allah knows best. But the point that I'm making, because there are brothers who are Somali that are upon the Sunnah, that float past this tribalism stuff, because they recognize the Sunnah is what's uppermost. We look at things through the eyes of the Sunnah, but then there are some people who are claiming to be upon the Sunnah and Salafiyya that don't do that. So I'm going to tell you about a Somali brother straight up told me. He said, we Somalis, we look down at the Black Americans because y'all don't memorize nothing. This is what a Somali told me. I wasn't in a position to check him because of the circumstantial situation that I was in. And in fact, I actually had to walk away because I was responsible for a conference that I had organized. And so I couldn't deal with with that statement. But this Somali brother at that time, I don't know if he is now, was the president of an administration to a Salafi masjid. Now, I don't care what excuse a person uses to justify their biases. If it's not lining up with the Sunnah, it doesn't make sense, it's illogical, and it's ignorance. So you're going to say, even as excuse, we look down at Black Americans because they don't memorize. First and foremost, how many generations has Islam been with us? And how many generations has Islam been in with the Somalis? So the culture has now, of the Somali, has now shifted over centuries of Islam being there. So they're memorizing Quran, they're memorizing this, they're memorizing that. Whereas you find some Black Americans that they running into at the masjid may have only been Muslim 5 or 10 years. And parents and grandparents are Christian. They're Christian. So that's one thing. But then second, the students of knowledge from amongst Black Americans are memorizing. Because this is another thing that I've noticed, that these Salafi Masajid that are connected, that are predominantly Somali, I noticed no Black American da'i has ever been invited to any of them. I've noticed white du'at have been invited to them, and Arab du'at have been invited to them, but no Black Americans. Now, one person may say, oh, well, Sheikh Fareed Abdullah was invited to this masjid and that masjid. Guess what? Sheikh Fareed Abdullah is not a Black American. He's from the Bahamas. He's a Bahamian. And you can believe that they make a distinction between that. You can believe that they make a distinction between that. And in fact, there was one masjid that broke away from Somali masjid where this type of stuff was taking place. That was supposed to be Salafi. And they made all types of excuses for breaking away. But the rock bottom line from some of the assumptions that was made was that they were experiencing that people were claiming to be Salafi upon the Sunnah, but they started to recognize that it was a lot of tribal hang-ups that were displayed, and they didn't want any part of that because they understood it doesn't matter what your background is, where you're from, white, Black, Latino, whatever the case may be. If you're upon the Sunnah and Salafiyah, you are a brother, and we're all the same, and none of us are closer to Allah by way of ethnicity or tribe, but all of us are considered to be noble with Allah based off taqwa. Like Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala states, Inna akramakum indallah atqakum. Atqakum. So the point that I'm making is, this is a munkar that we can't keep silent on. This is a munkar that we can't keep silent on. Now I'm gonna bring up a real example of what happened at one Salafi masjid, right? There was a janazah fund. There's a masjid, predominantly Somali, Salafi, and they were connected with two other masajid that were Somali. Now, predominantly Somali. Now, what I was told was that these other two masajid, they were not Salafi masajid, but they were working together for a maslaha. They had some type of janazah fund. So they were working together, in that regard, as a maslaha generally for the Muslims. And this is okay. There's nothing wrong with this, to bury the Muslims. And they would get on the minbar at the Salafi Masjid, and everybody would contribute to this Janazah fund. Although the attendees were predominantly Somali, there were other people of other different backgrounds there too. So one of the brothers who I was with in Saudi Arabia some years ago, one time he came back from Saudi, and he was in this particular community for a second before going back to Saudi. He made mention to me that there was a Black American brother that passed away. Family was not Muslim. So there was assistance needed with burying the brother. And so two of the brothers went to one of the admin members of this Salafi Masjid. And they informed him about the brother who was deceased, a brother who used to attend that masjid. And this admin, and I will say, I am not saying that the rest of the admin of that masjid was on that tip, because they made it explicitly clear that that was that one person that said that. Because I questioned them. You mean the admin in totality or one person? And they stated this one person. But this one person said to them that the African Americans are going to have to get their own Janazah fund together to bury this brother, implying that Janazah fund that they would go up and encourage people to donate from was specifically for the Somalis. Specifically for the Somalis. But they collected money from everybody, but specifically for them. This one person of that admin said that. This is the type of stuff that's not from Salafiyah. If this is the type of stuff that's not from Islam, that now this brother would be neglected or shunned or excluded because he's not of because he's not of the same ethnic background. And so this type of behavior, this is a munkar. Either we're brothers or we're not. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us only the believers are brothers. It doesn't matter, as far as I'm concerned, if a person's from Bosnia, if a person's from Honduras, if a person's from Nigeria, if a person's from Mali, if a person's from Malaysia, if a person's from Indonesia, if a person's from wherever he's from countries that don't come to mind at the moment, if he has al-Iman in his heart, and especially if he's upon the Sunnah, traversing upon the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, then that person is closer to me than my own blood brother. Because my blood brother loves kufr. My blood brother loves disobedience to Allah. My blood brother loves aspiring to achieve foolishness. To achieve foolishness. And this is the reality of when Iman actually envelops the heart. That regardless of what ethnic or racial background the person may be, if he is a believer and a worshiper of Allah the way that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala intends, then when you see him, your heart claps. And you want for him what you want for yourself. The good that's bestowed upon you, you want that bestowed upon him. And this transcends races and ethnicities. So when we find someone dividing amongst us based off this, then this is a munkar that we can't keep quiet on. This is a munkar that we can't keep quiet on. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us, al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat, ba'duhum awliya'u ba'din. The believers, men and women, they are but allies of one another. They are but allies of one another. يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله. الآية. And this goes into this verse when Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is giving a description of these believers who are allies of one another, who are friends of one another, who are supporters of one another. When he goes into the characteristics of them, the first thing he says is they enjoin the good and forbid the evil. This type of behavior that I mentioned is an evil. It's a munkar. We have to speak out against this because this is a means that divides us. This is the cause to the division amongst us. Especially, I'm speaking to the Muslims in general, but in specific to Ahlul Sunnah. How can we allow this type of thing to come between us? How can we allow this type of stuff to come between us? And we're reading the Quran. So I know some people may become offended by hearing this. I get it. But it has to be said. It has to be said. And I'm pretty sure I can only speak, again, some of the non-black brothers that are listening to this, come into the discussion. I'm pretty sure you have grievances in this regard from others yourself. Your voice, we want to hear your voices in that regard. But the point that I'm making is this thing is a munkar. We can't keep quiet on this. We can't keep quiet on this type of stuff. It hurts the dawah and it hurts the spread of al-Islam. Now, again, there were some brothers that came in. Again, if I'm in the middle of monologue, and just be patient with me till I finish it, and I'll let you into the discussion. Some brothers came in and then they left. But if you want to come back in, you could come back in and we'll converse and deal with this, deal with whatever questions, comments, differences of opinion. If there's advice that wants to be given, I'm accepting of all of that. I didn't expect this to be just me, speaking for however long I'm speaking, And it looks like I'm almost at 2 hours, so I'm going to close out pretty soon, inshallah. Another reality that's taking place is that when we look into certain masajid, mega masajid, right? So as some brothers refer to them as mega masajid, some of these nice masajid where millions of dollars are being poured into. And a lot of these types of masajid are run by majority immigrant brothers. I don't know if this term immigrant to brothers coming from whose grandparents are not from America originally, or parents are not from America originally. I don't know if I don't know if this is offensive or not. If it is, put it in the chat. But I don't mean to be offensive in any way whatsoever. But the point that I'm making is some of these masajid are run by people who are secular. They're not religious at all. In fact, there is a YouTube channel, Bukhari. It's just called Bukhari. It's in all caps. You want to step into the conversation, Hamza? Ahlan wa sahlan. You one of those brothers that when I see you, my heart claps. I'm gonna leave a link in there, inshallah. At any rate, um, there's a YouTube channel called Bukhari, and it's in all caps. And all they do, they go to this guy. He goes to these big masajid and interviews people. All right. And I saw a couple of the videos, and there was only one video where he went to a masjid in Utah where it appeared that the African Americans are going to have to get their. Bro, you gotta turn the volume down. There's an echo. You gotta turn your volume down, inshallah. So at any rate, let me make this point, Abdullah, then I'll let you say what you have.
No, take your time. Take your time. I'm listening.
So at any rate, there was only one masjid out of the various videos that I saw where it was someone of the Sunnah who was religious. And that was one in the masajid in Utah. But all the other masajid that I saw, they were literally run by people who were secular. And I've been to Egypt. When I say I've been, it wasn't for a 2-week vacation. No, I lived in Egypt. First time I was there for 6 months. Second time I was there for a year. I lived in Yemen for 3 years. I lived in Saudi for a year. I visited Qatar for 4 months. When you are in these countries, the Muslims are everywhere. The Muslims are everywhere. There are big masajid to accommodate the large numbers of Muslims. But when the salat time comes and it's time to pray, in some of these places, you barely get one line. You barely get one line. And if you get one line, you may get 2 or 3, and then but 90% of the masjid is empty. And so here's the reality. The type of people that's running these type of mega masjids, masajid, they're the type of people that wouldn't even be going to the salat in their own country if the salat was established.
Facts.
They wouldn't even be going to the salat in their own masajid. You're not in the discussion, Hamza. The point that I'm making is.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The point that I'm making is these are the leaders and authorities of these communities. In fact, before I continue that point, because I got the brothers in first, Abdullah, you came in first. I'm gonna pass the mic to you, inshallah.
No, finish. Go ahead and finish.
No. I'll jump back on that subject, but I don't want to hold the brothers up. I don't know you guys' time period.
I got time. I got time.
La best. Hamza, I think you muted Hamza.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Assalamu alaikum, ikhwan.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Are you, Najeeb, are you done? I don't want to interrupt you.
No, tafadal. I'll get back to that point. I just want to hear you guys' input.
Sure. I just had one real quick thing. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. One quick comment on some of the things that you were saying about brothers from the Black community, African American community, feeling shunned at certain communities, masajid. I'm an immigrant, and I've been in different types of masajid, since I came to the U.S. Well, since I started practicing rather. And one thing that I've seen is that the brothers, the Black brothers who accept Islam, of course, yeah, there's exceptions, but most of the time they're not the problem. It's the brothers who again, speaking as an immigrant, akhi, the brothers who come over here with a certain mentality and certain preconceived idea about black people and about African American people that are the problem. You know, they accuse the brothers of certain things, as you've mentioned, which a lot of times they're innocent of, and it's them who are, for lack of better words, actually, the self-righteous ones, but it's usually them who are the problem, the root cause of the problem as well. And what I've seen from African American brothers or black brothers when they accept Islam, again, like I said, there's exceptions to every rule, and in every community, but generally speaking, is that they sincerely want to become a part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
They sincerely approach that community with a mindset. Okay, I'm a Muslim now. And again, I can't relate to becoming a Muslim and having a kafir background and family and everything. But from what I've seen is they come with the notion of, okay, I'm a Muslim, I'm going to be accepted now. These are my people, but then it's not the case, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, and it's not their fault, akhi. It's really the fault of the immigrants who should know better, because their people have been Muslim for hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
Like my background is Bosnian. Our people have been Muslim for 700 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Somalis; they've been Muslims. Some the Habash. They used to be part of Habash at that time. You can argue that they were Muslims since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's the immigrant that are the problems, akhi, and not the black brothers who come into the immigrant community trying to assimilate and become a part of it, because they think, okay, I'm a Muslim now, I belong. But sadly, that's not the case, akhi, because a lot of people come here with a very ignorant state of mind.
No. But see, my thing is, again, like if we're dealing with non-Salafis, and let me not even say it like that, just people in general that just don't study aspects of the religion, then I would say that you can expect some of that. You can expect that there's going to be some type of misunderstandings, generally speaking, not necessarily racially speaking, but generally speaking, in terms of average everyday sins.
Ignorant.
But when I'm talking about brothers like myself and yourself, like we're going
Yeah,
into books, we're
yeah,
trying to on the Sunnah. There should be, I mean, we should be exemplifying it on a totally different level than to be absorbed into tribalism or colonialism, coming with a colonized mind. We should understand that these are ideas that would, depending on what country a person comes from. If if the country is colonized by Britain, for instance, these are ideas that the British try to instill in us. But our Islam is causing us to reject that, because we know that has nothing to do with Islam. You understand what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I look at brothers who are claiming to be upon the Sunnah on a high. I hold them to a higher standard. Because I mean, it's the Sunnah, man. I mean,
Okay, I heard Abu Wais rahimahullah years ago. I was listening to one of his tapes. This is way back when,
Mhm.
and he said something that stuck with me. He said that he was talking about brothers who convert and revert, but I think it applies to all across the board, because you got brothers who convert to Islam in the U.S. and they come with baggage, but then you got also brothers who come from Muslim backgrounds that have been living a life that is not Islamic, and they've done things that are not Islamic, and then they accept the da'wah maybe and start practicing, but they have that baggage. You know what I mean? And Abu Wais rahimahullah said that he heard at that time, he said he heard that it takes about 20 years, for the average person to kind of shed that baggage
Mm-hmm.
that he comes into this deen with. And remember, these brothers, even though they may be coming from a Muslim background like myself, akhi, if you're not practicing in that culture, there's other problems that us immigrants deal with within our cultures that are very, very un-Islamic. So
Mm-hmm.
just because we culturally may be identifying as Muslims, that's about it.
Yeah.
But like our practices, our cultures, our traditions, akhi, they may be dating back to like 2,000 years ago, when we were still tribal people and stuff, within our respective communities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we bring that stuff into the deen as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another aspect I think that one has to look into it. It is, just because the community is known to be Muslim community, akhi, but it's much deeper than that. Nationalism, tribalism, all that stuff. Some communities, even though they are from the same country, hate each other just because they're from a different city or different tribe, different village.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Yeah,
I'm definitely aware of
yeah.
that. And this is where it takes the brothers who are involved in dawah amongst ourselves to be meeting and convening amongst each other to discuss the best ways to tackle this. You know, but that leads me to a different discussion that I planned on. I think I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna. I see I've been talking for 2 hours, but I'm willing to go 3 hours on this one tonight because the rock bottom line. I want to deal with the fact that Ahlus Sunnah are splintered, and one of the reasons why brothers involved in dawah can't convene amongst ourselves and discuss these issues and try and hammer out the best ways to go about and dealing with some of these issues. And if we can't figure out certain things, then we collectively send questions back, detailed questions back to one of the mashayikh to give us tawjihad on how to deal with some of these things. And the reason why we can't do something as simple as that is because we are splintered. And I definitely want to address that. But these things, like Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He states, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu stajibu lillahi walil rasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. O you who believe, answer the call of Allah and His Messenger when they call you to that which will give you life. Anything that opposes that figuratively is death. Figuratively is death. And one of the things that a person upon the Sunnah is supposed to be, he's supposed to be a Muslim, someone that brings about rectification to a situation, to himself first and foremost, to his family, and if he's able, to his neighbors and to the society in general. You know, and so we should be able to convene amongst each other and address what the munkarat are and what's the best possible ways of us remedying these issues.
Okay, Najeeb, please forgive me. I wanted to just jump in quick, Akhi. I got something to do in about 5 minutes. So
Wafakakum
if you
Allah.
forgive me, Akhi, I'll jump off here, inshallah, and I'll leave you to it. We'll talk later, inshallah. We'll catch up.
Wafakakum Allah.
Abdullah, brother, Akhi, it was good meeting you, brother.
Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu
Hayyakum Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa
fiik.
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tafadali
Yeah.
Abdullah.
Bismillah. I'm here with you, man. I feel the same way in regards to not just the community that you mentioned, the Somali community, but it's all of the communities. The Egyptian community, like you said, the Somali community. Just about a lot of these communities have this bias bias, attitude towards the black people. I don't know what they be getting there and who they getting the information to, who they getting the information from in regards to us. How they look at us, how they view us, how they treat us, how they talk to us, and they always use that ayat innamal mu'minun al-ikhwa. They always that's their famous line, but I don't see that from them. I don't feel that. When I walk into these Egyptian masjids, I don't feel welcome. And even it's sad to say, even from amongst our brothers, they have that biased attitude towards us too. If we're not in line, if you're not in line or intertwined with what they on, they kind of like shun you too. So we have to call all of that stuff out. All of these biases and all of this attitude that is, it's not from Islam. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was against all of this. All of these isms and this attitude towards each other was not from his way, even though they claim the sunnah. So I feel the same way too. Like, here where I'm at, I don't feel like I don't have a community. I don't have a community. I'm in a class all by myself. So when I walk into a masjid, when I walk into an Egyptian masjid, which is centered around me, some of the brothers is cool, but for the most part, you don't really get that welcome and warm and feeling from them. You get that, that sound like them, or they don't even give you the salams. You got to say it, 3-4 times in order for them to say wa alaikum salam. So it's strange, man. It just, it's a good thing that I jumped on this channel, because I heard, I'm like, hold on, this sounds like, a discussion that we all need to have. We need to have these discussions on on these platforms. Hopefully this will spark a conversation from amongst those different groups that, we can talk and have a discussion.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure some people are going to attempt to make me their punching bag, but I'll swing back.
Right.
But the bottom line is, like I said, I'm not trying to make anybody feel alienated, but I'm starting to get sick and tired of seeing certain things. Like, this is loser stuff, If we have the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, we know how we're supposed to move, and so we have to act accordingly. Our brother Hamza, he puts one last thing: ideological warfare is more dangerous than physical. The body dying is less of an issue than the mind. Yeah, the body dying is less of an issue than the mind or the heart dying. So I definitely agree with that.
Right. Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
So the bottom line is, though, like I said, man, we have to start to address some of these munkarat. And I hope I don't lose friends over this.
Hey, alhamdulillah, the truth is the truth.
Yeah, if people, people who have my phone number who may have a misunderstanding of something I said or have an issue with something I said, they can easily give me a call. I noticed that in this day and time, I mean, simple things like, okay, I felt like that was said wrong, and a simple thing of picking up the phone and it just investigating, what did you mean by this? What did you mean by that? Did you mean this? Or I was offended by that. I felt like you could have said this, or I felt like you misrepresented that. It seemed like that common courtesy with a lot of people, it's not being fulfilled, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, okay,
what's your statement real quick?
Yeah. So Allah mustaan, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No. I don't know if you had anything else.
I would just piggyback off of, what you were saying in regards to the biasness, and it's even from amongst our own self too. From amongst our communities, the black communities, we have biasness and certain people that we deal with, certain people that we talk to. If you're not affiliated with me, or if you don't know me and so forth like that, we kind of like, get up out of here. Like, I don't even know this dude. Like, we have that attitude towards each other. So it's with a lot of the communities, the black community, the Pakistanis, the Egyptians, all of that. So all of that need to be addressed, and I'm pretty sure you got some more things that you want to address too, along the way. So this is a good topic.
Yeah, wafakakum Allah.
So it was some other stuff that you wanted to present.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to that initial point that I was making a few seconds before I allowed you guys to start talking.
Okay.
That most of these well-financed masajid, again, are run. The authorities of these masajid are secular people who are not religious, people that if they were in their own countries, they wouldn't even pray at their local masjid.
Mm.
And as I was saying earlier, based off my time in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Yemen, and that's for so on, I've witnessed this. I'm not saying something that's, I'm assuming or making an assumption. You're dealing with countries where everybody's Muslim in the masajid, with the exception of Egypt, though. There's a lot of Christians in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is the areas that I was in were basically 100% Muslim areas, and the masajid weren't filled. But when you step outside and daily life is going by as if, especially here it is, the adhan is called on the loudspeaker, and the salat is performed with the loudspeaker on. So you hear all the takbirat. Sami Allahu liman hamida. And even in taslim, and you step out and people are just doing a normal thing. But
that's
the
how
point
it was when I was in Egypt too. When I was in Egypt, you see people playing soccer and everything while Jumu'ah is going on, the Salah is going on. They outside playing soccer.
Yeah. Main point that I'm trying to make though is it's these types of people that are running a lot of the masajid.
Mm-hmm.
And I alluded to the fact that the Dawah scene here in the U.S. needs a lot of improvement. When you look at the type of people that are running these masajid and who they hire to be the religious authorities, and the religious authorities there are nothing more than just paid yes men. But this is when you start to understand why there are certain scandals that are now happening in those types of communities. You have this scandal going on as it pertains to Dunya Shuaib,
Mm-hmm.
who I don't know why she's being promoted and put on any platform talking about anything.
What was that?
She's a da'iyah amongst their communities in those types of places.
Somali community?
No, she's not Somali. She's I don't know what her background is. She may be Arab or I'm not. She may be Palestinian. I'm not sure what her background is, but she's from those types. I've never seen a Somali mega masjid. I'm talking about these mega masjids right now.
These big joints, they got money.
Yeah, Indo-Paks and Arabs, basically. When you look at the scandal that's going, and a lot of these scandals I just started to become aware of. There's a brother named Nick Pelletier. I know I'm busting up his last name, Pelletier. Najeeb corrected me every time I said his name incorrectly, but he's a graduate of one of the Islamic universities in in Saudi Arabia. And it was an incident of some type of sexual misconduct of a member in the community. And he tried to call that munkar out.
That's the brother that had the hat on, and you the white Caucasian brother.
Yeah. His video.
Yeah.
He tried to call that munkar out, and you see the names he was dropping in his video of people that he went to for help and how they aided and abetted the covering up of the munkar. I remember he mentioned Yasser Qadi and Suhaib Webb and a whole lot of a bunch of other people. These are the type of people who are paid or hired imams of masajid. Some of those masajid are not mega masajid, but of masajid, where the authorities are people who most likely wouldn't even be praying at the masjid in their own country.
Right.
And he mentioned that in that video too. And when he said it, I agree because I had already been saying this before. Some of these organizations, ISNA, when you start looking at the board for the ones that have who's on the board and all that, again, these people aren't even religious. But these are religious institutions. The masjid is a religious institution. Yet these people, these types of people are over it. This is a problem.
Mm.
And then you hear about this. So with Nick Pelletier, man, I'm just going to say Nick, brother Nick, the things that he pointed out, you know, and the names that he was naming, you know, when you look at the type of places that they're at, then you see that this stuff is look at the stuff that Nu'man Ali Khan got caught up in. His name got caught up in.
Mm.
You know, I'm trying to. It was one that was on my mind. I saw the video just the other day of this brother who was married to this Dunya Shu'aib, and he was talking about this Yasser Burgess and Umar Suleiman, how they aided and abetted in munkarat, basically, against his integrity. If these types of things are true, because I said to myself, look at the type of stuff that these brothers are being caught up in. And they're being accused of.
Right. That's some serious stuff. Man.
Yeah. And so the Dawah saying, and these are the people who have influence over the general Muslims. This is one of the things that has to be understood too. The callers in the West from Ahlul Sunnah, including myself, don't have any real influence over the general body of Muslims, just 1% of the population of the U.S. We don't. We're virtually unknown to the general Muslims. Now, you can go in we can masjid to masjid and start asking, have you heard of this one? Have you heard of that one? Have you heard of this one? Have you heard of that one? That one. They never heard of us.
Right. It's crazy.
To these Muslims, the ulama of America, and I'm saying it just like that, is the Umar Suleimans, the Yasser Qadis, the Yasser Burgesses, and on and on and on. I mean, there's a Quran reciter who just got caught up with doing some type of sexual act with some sister's daughter. And got arrested, I believe, by the feds. And his name escapes me at the moment because I never heard of him before that anyway. But
he's a well-known reciter?
I guess so. That's what, you know, when I talked to Dawood Adib about it, I said, listen, I never even heard of this guy. He was like, and he was telling me, no, he's well-known amongst the community. I can't even remember the guy's name. I'm seriously trying to remember this guy's name. I don't know if I have, let me see. I'm seriously trying to remember this guy's name. I don't even remember his name. And I think that just goes to show me that either I'm out of touch or I'm in the right circles. You know,
yeah.
Either one or
the other.
Yeah, either I'm out of touch or I'm in the right circles, right?
You're in your own bubble.
Yeah, but the problem, like I said, this guy is supposed to be some big reciter and Quran teacher, and his name got caught up in filth like that. In fact, Sajid Lipham did a video about him recently. He did a video about him. Let me see. Yeah. Somebody just put it, Wissam Sharif. That's him. Wissam Sharif.
Wissam Sharif? I never heard of that.
Yeah, but he's big. He's
a well-known reciter.
He appears to be big.
He's from America. He's over in America?
Yeah, he's in America, yeah. So the point that I'm making is they're getting caught up in all this stuff, and the people who are charged from amongst the du'at of those persuasions who are charged to to safeguard the community and call out the munkarat like this, from what our brother Nick was saying, it just appears that they're covering up stuff. And
They're silent with this stuff.
yeah. And the sad reality is, what do you expect when you're dealing with masajid that are literally run by people who are not even religious?
They're just getting paid.
Yeah, it's like the masjid is a business at this point.
Right.
It's a cash grab.
Right.
And this is the reason why those types of brothers could be in those communities. Like I look at Sheikh Fareed Abdullah. Sheikh Fareed Abdullah stepped into South Central Los Angeles.
I remember that brother, man. I don't know.
And was dealing with ex-Bloods and Crips. I can mention names of brothers and start naming the gangs that they used to be from. They was from some of the most notorious gangs in LA. This one from East Coast, this one from Southside Compton, this one from Schoolyard, this one from Pasadena Devon Lane, this one from Six Deuce Harvard Park Brim, and on and on and on. But if you saw those brothers and their implementation of the Sunnah and how they moved and what their character was like, you probably wouldn't. You would probably say to yourself, I know he got some type of background, but you probably wouldn't guess that these brothers was that knee deep in to the streets like how they were.
That must be changed, huh?
Yeah, because you had a teacher that was an agent of change for the brothers in the community. He went in there, he taught what he was supposed to teach. There wasn't no cut on it. He taught people by Allah's permission to love the Sunnah, right? To love the Sunnah and implement the Sunnah, and that's for so on, and to see clarity of what the Sunnah is, and that it fostered that love within the hearts of the believers, and you saw a transformation in the behavior and the outlook of the brothers as it pertains to this dunya and life and like this. And you found brothers who were serious upon striving to get to paradise based off clarity. So when you look at callers and their fruits who are in communities like this, and that are giving it up, do you see the community and the people within the community? You see that Islam is transformative. But if you have a brother that's been teaching in the community for 10 or 12 years, and there's no transformation happening with the people in the community, not even a superficial one, not even a superficial one, then what have these brothers been doing all this time?
All they there for is that check.
And it may not be that they there for the check. It may be that it may be, well, yeah, to a degree, but it may be that
I'm saying when you're getting paid, it's only but so much you gonna say and do anyway. Like you just
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. They became compromised. They may have wanted to do this or do that, but they eventually became compromised, and now we don't want you to teach that. We don't want you to teach this. And, they, as the person who trained on how to go about rectifying a situation, they trained X amount of years to do that. And now they have these people who haven't sat 5 minutes to study anything in terms of guidance, directing them on how they should make their call.
Right.
And this is a munkar in itself.
Exactly.
This is a munkar in itself. Now, I want to be honest with you. This particular problem, I could say that I honestly don't know the solutions to that. Should the brothers just totally abandon these type of masajid I don't think that should be done because, like I was saying before, we're in Dar al-Kufr. Some Islam is better than no Islam. You know, I love to be driving through a city, and if that's the only type of masjid, to have the ability to be able to go in and pray. But something has to change. Something has to change in that regard. You know, and Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala knows best. And so this leads me to the last point of tonight's discussion. That when it comes to the callers upon the Sunnah here in the U.S., that we have absolutely no influence, generally speaking, over the general masses of Muslims. We have influences over bubbles of small networks or bubbles. That's it. And one of the root causes of why that is because of the splitting that has taken place amongst us. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ. Al-Ayah, right? Allah says, obey Allah and His Messenger and do not fall into disputation lest you become emasculated and your strength departs. And your strength departs. And right now, in this day and time, we are looking at and experiencing the fruits of division. And right now, and I've said this on more than one occasion, and I feel like this needs to keep being hammered. Sheikh Fareed, when he was on the scene, along with others, and I would say before Abu Uwais, when Abu Muslima and Abu Usama, when they were all working together, they laid foundation. They were the ones in the early 2000s, the 90s going into the early 2000s, on the East Coast specifically, that were at the forefront of making a call to Sunnah and Salafiyya in the U.S. Those were the Salafi Du'at. They built up large followings of people in the tri-state area. Then fast forward a little bit, fast forward a little bit, their students stepped into positions of dawah. They didn't build up anything, they inherited
the fruits of their labor.
Yeah, they didn't build up anything, they inherited, right? Once Abu Muslim was eventually, we all know the history. There's no need to go back into the history, but Abu Muslim was sidelined. Abu Usama basically was sidelined as well. Dawood kept going, but eventually Dawood kept going. But the point that I'm making is they built up a large following of people claiming to be upon the Sunnah. And so their students started coming back from overseas and they inherited what they built up. But unfortunately, due to a lot of different things, their students started to tear down a lot of what they built up. People who were students of Sheikh Dawood and students of the other Abu Usama and Abu Muslim, they started to tear down what these brothers built up. It wasn't immediately, it was over time. But the point that I'm making is it leads us to where we're at now. Brothers are splintered here and there. Like me, myself personally, I proclaim this loudly. And I've been proclaiming this for quite some time, that al-Anjelesi is not with a clique. If you're upon the Sunnah, if you're a hukum, is that you're upon the Sunnah, you're a Sunni, you're an Athari, you're a Salafi. Not in terms of being a member of a hizb that just named themselves with that,
Right.
but in terms of a person that is following a methodology, that has been revealed from above the seven heavens, then even if I don't know you personally, I'm with you.
Right. Same here.
And I am not going to allow a differing between a brother who's a caller and another brother who's a caller that they have with each other to restrict me from dealing with either of the two. If their hukum is what I said. Right? And I'm not going to allow a mistake that somebody has made, whether perceived mistake and not an actual mistake, or an actual mistake, if it is not of a level that should have me like, okay, hold up, let me slow down right now.
Right.
I'm not going to allow that mistake to now cause me, the boogeyman. Oh, so-and-so, they're so-and-so. Oh, no, the duck running high, they're so-and-so. I can't be seen with him. No pictures, please. You know, I'm not, I'm not on that tip, right? I'm not on that. That's that type of mentality is a part of the problem, right? That type of mentality is a part of the problem. And so when dealing with this issue, one, we're living in the fruits of we're seeing the fruits of this division. This division has come as a result of ghulu, going beyond bounds in some affairs. And it also has come as a result of ignorance in some affairs. Ignorance on the part of du'at, and ignorance on the part of people who are following those du'at. Because once again, we see the claim of principles over personalities. But since I've been on this side of the country, I've seen a lot of personalities over principles.
Facts.
I've seen a lot of personalities over principles. Right. Anybody that wants to come in can step in, inshallah. The link is, I just left the link in the comment section. All I ask is people come in respectfully. That's all I ask. So I want to give some examples so that people aren't left in the dark in what I'm talking about, right? So we have the situation of Muwaazana. And I'm going to bring up Muwaazana just based off something that recently happened. I had an interview with Dawah. As everybody knows, there's about 5 parts. Sheikh Dawah and myself on Urban Dua Dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the episodes, I made a statement where I said, I stand on the shoulders of W.D. Muhammad, and I explained exactly what I meant about how my father and mother were members of the NOI, Elijah Muhammad's NOI, not Farrakhan's, Elijah Muhammad's NOI. And then in 1975, when Elijah passed away, Imam Warithuddin Muhammad took it over, and Sheikh Dawood explained how he gave these mass shahadas. And that's how my parents came into al-Islam. And in 1978, I was born. So alhamdulillah, I was born
Into it.
to Muslim parents, married, and I was born into Islam. I didn't change my name to Najeeb from Ron or John or whatever. No, I was born given the name Najeeb, right? And that's what I meant, and I believe that it was explicitly clear. And then Dawud D made mention that he made a statement about giving people, we got to give people their props, and then he went in and explained what he meant by that too. A few days later, I'm getting messages, not from a lot of people, but from people that I know still have a connection with Ashab al-Ghulu in the US that claim to be Salafi. About what is the hukum on saying this? One brother even sent a screenshot of me saying what I said, somebody clipped it out and sent it to me. I stand on the shoulders of WD, and what I said, stop at the end. Is it
your joint that joint is all on it. It's all over the dunya. It's
yeah.
They got it on the site. I don't know if you know. It's a site that they got that on. The misguided group something that they created. They created all the du'as that's misguided, and they put they got a clip of your face and some of the other du'as and stuff like that with statements that they made.
Now I don't know about that, but whatever. The main point that I'm making is, and this is why I say ignorance on the part of those du'at and ignorance on the part of their followers. So at least with this person, though, he reached out and was asking questions to try and ascertain what was what. And so he was asking me about, although he knows this is true, it was something to the effect, should we be praising them or whatever the case? And so to make a long story short, I actually sent him fatwa of ulama stating that what was done was okay, because it was basically explaining what was factual in history. We're talking about something that's factual in history, right? Events that actually took place. And so, at any rate, the point that I'm making is they said they were telling their followers that this was Muwaazana. And it's as if these du'at have an understanding that Muwaazana is simply to say something good about a person of innovation, a person who's not on the sunnah. That if you say something good about them, you've fallen into Muwaazana. And this is what I mean when I say this is one of the causes for the problem of this tafarruq, because first they're teaching that, and that's not what Muwaazana is. That which they normally translate as counterbalancing. Muwaazana is to oblige others with the mentioning of their good deed, to oblige others with the mentioning of the good deeds of a person of innovation or a person of batil, while you're in a space where you're warning against their evil. And they say this is obligatory for you to do. That's why I say obliging a criticizer with that. Because if you don't do that, they say you've oppressed the person. That's what Muwaazana is. And when you look at the fatwa of the ulama, this is why you find them saying it's not necessary for you to mention their good deeds. It nullifies blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. It nullifies what you're trying to do. It's not obligatory for you to do this. You don't have to do that. But these guys have the understanding to just merely mention a good deed. You've fallen into Muwaazana. But if that's the case, then that would mean some of the Mashaykh are the first ones that fell into Muwaazana, like Sheikh Mukbil, who in his book, Makhraj min al-Fitna, when he talked about Jama'at Tabligh, what did he refer to them as? Jama'atun Mubarakatun. And mention some of the good things that they do before he criticized them for the mistakes.
It's just like, say for instance, like, you came from the Nation of Islam, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't they're upon Bartilla or and stuff like that. But you may say, but they cleaned up the neighborhoods and they did a lot of good stuff, and you mentioned some of the good things that they was able to do in the community, back then. But that doesn't mean that you actually praising them like that. That just
No, you're speaking on what actually occurred factually in history.
right.
That's all you're doing. It's not from insaf. It's not from fairness that you're giving the history of a person or a group, and you negate to mention these aspects of what they did because it's considered it's considered to be good, and you're saying to yourself, "Oh, I don't want to praise them." You're speaking about history. It's from insaf to mention the history in its totality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were doing in the interview, And so, but then a paper comes out by one person, Muwaazana. I end up getting an audio from a conference of one of their imams, who I was actually surprised. Well, he quoted Dawud Adib verbatim, just didn't mention Dawud Adib's name. And this particular individual, I was actually surprised that he came with that. Because people were trying to convince me that he's not like those other guys. But I don't see the difference. Not from that. I listened to that speech. It was, I think, an hour, 45 minutes long. I listened to it from beginning to end. Sound just like those guys. And on top of that, criticizing his elder for non-issue one. And then two, man, this man, the type of work that this man has put in the community, you couldn't pick up the phone and call him?
So that's our problem.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
And that's why I say this ghulu and it's jahil. And I place that on the du'at and their followers, because a lot of their followers will be knowing that stuff is wrong. And they still roll with it anyway.
You're complicit.
Can I
complicit?
Inshallah.
تفضل يا أخي.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
نعم الحمد لله رب العالمين. بارك الله فيكم جزاك الله خير. The first thing that I want to say is really pertaining to exactly what you're talking about, and as far as the cultural ills. I think that the cultural ills have not only affected the people outside, but also, or the immigrants, but it has also affected our people. From those who are from the layman's to those who are from the tulab ilm, and on and on ila akhiri. Because the cultural ills that we have for centuries, right? You can see them at work among the people, especially when they have a difference of opinion, or when they have when they have issues with each other, how easy it is for them to part and separate or to turn against one another. This is something that has been going on among our people for so long, dating way back to the slavery times, as some of the people used to refer to it as the field nigga and the house nigga. Excuse my language.
Yeah, understood. I highly doubt there's any children watching at this late, right?
But so, and how the one, the house, how the ones in the house hated against the ones in the yard, or they looked down upon the ones in the yard, and how the ones in the yard frowned upon the ones in the house. But however, the reason why I'm bringing that is how it correlates with what you're talking about is the state of mind, right? The mindset that plays a major part in today's time between a lot of our people, a lot of our brothers and our sisters, and how we carry that over. And this is why you'll see some of the sisters who they have a dispute with one another and they fight and they go on and on and on. And the brothers who have problems with each other and they can't come together, sit down and talk about it, fisabilillah. Because of the culture that has plagued them prior to Islam, and how they have brought those cultural ills into their practice of Islam. And it's so bad that even our tulab ilm, right, not to mock any of them, but you see it even amongst them. You see these very cultural ills among them as well. So it's not just from the immigrants, and not saying that that was your point, and not saying that you were making that statement, but I was just talking to some of my companions recently, and I was saying, I for a long time, that was me. I was pointing to some of the people, you know, some of the Africans and some of the Arabs, and how they have these cultural ills and how they mix religion and culture. Mm-hmm. And then just as of recently, just a few months ago, I just really kind of sat back and I really began to observe our people and realize that a lot of the problems, the tafarruq that you're talking about, it comes from that very thing. The fact that our people, that us, the ones who are ascribing to Salafiyya and supposed to be implementing Salafiyya, that we are bringing those very same cultural ills into the practice of Islam, just like I have been looking at and observing from those who are from the immigrants and so on.
Now, I agree 100% with that, because it's coming down to the Willie Lynch mentality.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there's more than a Willie Lynch as well, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I do believe we have agent provocateurs amongst us too.
Yeah.
And this shouldn't be something. Now, Allah knows best who is who, but just keep this in mind. Let's keep this in perspective for a second. You had in the 1950s and 60s, the civil rights era here in the U.S. You had the Black Panthers, you had the NOI, you had other black civil rights groups, Martin Luther King and what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And America and the American government considered that a threat to democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And these were people that were just fighting for basic equality and opportunity, basically. That's what they were fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
That which they was fighting for is nowhere near as powerful as the Hidayah that has been revealed from above the seven heavens.
No.
And we saw the strides that the U.S. government made to dismantle that. In the 60s and like this.
Mm-hmm.
So it shouldn't be hard to comprehend. If they would do that with that, why do we think that they wouldn't do that with Islam? Especially with J. Edgar Hoover stating that trying to give Islam to the Negroes like putting a trouser on a pair of trousers on an elephant.
Mm.
So they already had a disdain for Islam reaching the community.
Mm-hmm.
And now, because we all know that the NOI stuff wasn't really Islam, and they were still threatened by it. And now Islam is here. It's here. So my thing is, I think there's a lot of factors, and I'm not saying that to minimize what you're saying, because I think that Willie Lynch syndrome is a part of it.
So do you think
is a big part of it? One second, I'll let you. But agent, I do believe that we have some agent provocateurs amongst us, and let me just make this clear: agent provocateurs of two types: a full-blown, straight-up munafiq, somebody claiming to be Muslim, but really a kafir, infiltrating.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second is, there's a political term, a useful idiot, right? And a useful idiot, what's intended by that is a person who champions a cause that he believes is in his best interest, but it's really in the best interest of others, his enemies.
Mm. Yeah, he only can be used for so long. Then once they finish, once he realized that he's no longer used, then that's when they toss him to the side.
But that's the munafiq. But the useful idiot, he's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, he never realizes that he's being used in that way, and that's why.
Yeah. So I saw a documentary about 2 years ago where unfortunately the FBI was paying some brother in New York to spy basically on the community that he helped establish, and this guy ended up being instrumental in having the imam locked up. And he had to get out of New York, and the FBI sent him to a community a community that he was unknown in, and had him spying in that community.
So you think that this is why it's keeping the Muslims, the people upon Sunnah, Salafi?
I believe it's a component, but I can't. I'm not going to say it's 50, 60, or 70% the problem, because what our brother was saying, a lot of that is true. But then there's another component too, where people just straight up have agendas.
Right.
It's obvious. It's obvious that there's an agenda. You don't have to know what the agenda is to see that there's an agenda.
Right.
There's clearly an agenda with some people. And the way that certain, some of these brothers, claim that, for instance, I was overseas, I sat with this one and that one. Not from where I'm sitting. I can't tell you did.
Right. It don't look like it to me.
I'll give you an example. I'm just going to give some examples, right? I'm in an area where it's spread out, right? There was a situation where there was a sister. She had a daughter that was being bullied in school out here in a city called Cambridge, which is about 30 minutes away from me. Now, there's 4 masajid in this area. One masjid is in a city called Easton, which was 20 minutes from where she's at, right? For some reason, she didn't contact any of the masajid around here, right? But somehow she got in contact with Masjid al-Hidayah in Baltimore, right? And I guess maybe she has some connection with them. At any rate, I get a flyer from one of the brothers down here about Masjid al-Hidayah throwing some type of barbecue or whatever in that city on account of what was going on with this sister's daughter. And I'm read another write-up, and I'm like, I read another write-up, and it's talking about what was going on. Sisters hijab being pulled off in school, people coming to the house in ski masks, girls come to the house trying to fight the Muslimah. Now, when I read this, Akhi, I said, this is an all hands on deck alert right here to see something like this. And this had been going on for some months. And so I got notice of it the same day that these brothers were supposed to be out there in Cambridge doing a barbecue. First thing I did was get on the phone with one of the administrators of one of the masjids out here. And I asked him, had he heard about what was going on? And I was inquiring about who, because I think the sister's name was mentioned in the thing. I'm not sure. I can't recall if her name was mentioned in the thing or not. But the brother has said no, he hadn't heard of that. And the brother who sent it to me was in that same city. And I'm like, well, who is the sister? The brothers, he attended the masjid that's 20 minutes away. I said, did the brothers over there hear about it? He was like, no. So when I called the administrator of the masjid here in the area, and I told him what was going on, I told him, listen, man, we need to get, because we know that city there's a lot of violence going on in that city. So I said, we need to come together as a community and get that sister out of there. I said, this is an all hands on deck. The type of stuff that's written on this write-up, we need to help get her out of there. right? And we were already strategizing on how we can help her get out of that city and move to a more Islam friendly city where there's Muslim. The city that I live in right now, where there's Muslims at, and you see sisters, you know, and none of them are in danger. You don't hear about any of that type of stuff happening. So although Masjid Hidayah was putting that thing together, I'm like, I'm gonna go down there because I want to assist this sister. So I'll drive down there, right? So of course, with Masjid Hidayah being the one doing it, of course, I automatically assumed the Imam Raha Betts was going to be there. I said, so what? I mean, he's probably just going to ignore me. You know, that's all good. I'm not really there for him anyway. It's about the sister. So I drive down there. When I get there, they set up in a little open area. I drive, I park, I hop out. I see one of the brothers. I see a brother, you know, one of the brothers in the throw. I hop out, I get his salams. I don't know who this brother is. He said he's originally from that city, but as soon as he saw me, the way that he reacted, he knew who I was, right? Most likely from YouTube and like this. And he was cordial. He wasn't acting, you know, in a hostile. He was cordial, and I chopped it up with him. And I told him, and some of the other brothers were walking up, brothers who live there now that know me. And so I asked the brother, listen, I told him that I talked to, you know, one of the head of the administration of a masjid in another city here. And we want to try to help the sister get out of this situation because we know the city right here is real, you know, it's real volatile. And even that brother was agreeing that probably what needs to be done. She probably needs to get up out of here. So I'm like, listen, which one is the sister? You know, point me to the sister so I could talk to her. I need to talk to her if this is the case and to see what she wants to do. So he said he had her number. He tried calling her. He said she wasn't picking up. I think he texted her. Didn't hear no reply on a text. Then another sister walked by. He said, that's one of her daughters over there. He walks over there, talks to her, and then he walks back. Now, I'm sitting here for about 30, 40 minutes now, and the sister still hasn't come over. Now, we see those brothers getting ready to pray Asr. So the brother from Baltimore and the other brothers from Cambridge, from that city, Cambridge, was like, they're about to go pray. Let's go pray. So I'm like, okay, no problem. We're across the street, down the street from them. As soon as I walk across the street, out of nowhere, because I'm like, these guys came out of nowhere. Like they was watching me. It seemed like they must have been watching me the whole time. Anwar Wright, Raha Betts, and the third person walk up. And I'm walking, and they're walking towards us. We're walking towards them. And Anwar said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" And I didn't realize he was talking to me. I said, "Who, me?" He's like, "Yeah, you." So I started walking with him because the other brothers kept walking. So he asked me, and in retrospect, I said, "This is a pretty stupid question to ask me." He said, "So what brought you down here?" So I told him, I said, "Bro, I got wind of this sister and her daughter being done the way that they were being done. So I came here to help bring some resolution to the situation." Oh, it's already been resolved. He said something that's already been resolved. And then he started going into, you saw who was on the flyer. You know, you speak ill of the Salafis. He's got to start doing his rundown. You speak ill of the Salafis. You with Muhammad bin Hadi, and whatever else he said. You're not welcome here. And then they just all zipped off. They just all zipped off. Now,
the culture, man.
Yeah. Now, that's somebody who sat with the ulama. You couldn't figure out why I was down there. Here it is. We got a sister, and it's an all hands on deck situation, and you're acting like this. At best, you should have just ignored me.
Right.
But guess what happened as a result of that, right? I end up connecting with the sister anyway the very next day. So he didn't stop anything, right? I discussed with I gave her my number. I gave her the number to the administrator of the masjid that she took her shahada at. I told her.
Was that situation still going on while you was there?
No. They came. Now I will say them brothers did a good job of handling that. They did a good job of handling it. They went to the school. I started finding out the things that they did when they were there. They went to the school. In fact, one of their parents accepted Islam, walillah alhamd, and another parent made sure that they told the sister, the mother, that they didn't know that was taking place and that wasn't going to happen again. But the main point that I'm making is you have a situation like that where the kuffar are directly threatening the life of a Muslim. Why do you think I'm here?
You speak ill of.
You understand what I'm saying? So these are people that sat with the ulama. I can't tell. Now, barakallahu fiqh Abu Saliha. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته شيخنا كيف حالكم؟
كل شيء تمام ولله الحمد. بارك الله فيك. أهلا وسهلا.
بارك الله فيكم. شيخ لو حسمات إن شاء الله. I have one question إن شاء الله.
تفضل يا أخي.
Is it in the near, maybe in the future, because I believe that will happen now, that all of the Salafis will be united? That alhamdulillah, like the Salafis from every state in America, that the Salafis will be united. Is that something that's possible in the future, in your opinion? Barakallahu feekum.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible if people are willing to take the steps to bring about rectification. And so, first and foremost, we got to understand what you mean when you say the Salafis. We're not talking about a group of people that fell into tahazzub and just put the name. We're the Salafis, and we're like a brand. If you're talking about those guys, it'll never be unity amongst them because they're prone to tafarruq. But for the people who are traversing the methodology, it's very possible, because I've been in meetings where people are bringing up what they have against this one and that one, and as far as I'm concerned, they're not issues that can't be worked out. Everybody just has to be willing to work them out. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear anything that was that couldn't be worked out. So in that regard, if people are willing to step to the table and deal with these issues, then it can be done. It just really comes down to, are people willing to do that or not?
The ego is there, so they don't want to do it because of their ego.
Yeah.
No, subhanallah.
One of the major answers to, or solutions, first and foremost, qawaid al-Salafiyya. A lot of, unfortunately, and I'm not using this term generally, I'm using this very specifically, a lot of us are not aware of the principles of Salafiyya. And for that reason, for that purpose, there are things that happen that the people are not even aware. Like you said, a useful idiot in Afwan, and I'm not trying to, call out, disrespect any of our people or insult our people, or insult the Muslims. But what I am saying is, due to the ignorance, as we know, is two types of ignorance: that ignorance that is intentional, and then that ignorance that is unintentional. Okay.
Somebody said they may be watching right now. Subhanallah.
Hey, walillah alhamd. However, the simple fact that the people, because most of the people, when you ask them, what are the principles of Salafiyya, they will say, Qala Allah, Qala Rasulullah, wa Qala Sahaba, and leave it at that. They don't go past it. Majority of the people who you ask, majority of the people who you come by, when you ask them that question, this is what they say. And this right here is the extent of their knowledge and understanding. But this is only one principle, and it's the very first principle. from Qawaid al-Salafiyya. So if you only know one principle, imagine all the other mistakes and all the other mishaps that they are falling into as a result of their lack of knowledge of the principles and how to implement them, and how easily they are swayed as a result as well. So that, I believe, also is one of the major issues that really is leading to the ability for those who are, alhamdulillah, who attend the masajid, and those who strive to be amongst the Muslims, but they suffer from this. Okay, this is compounded ignorance, and it is leading to, it's like a super virus, as the doctors will explain, is when your body is going through, coming back from healing from being sick, you're having a cold, and then you're around someone who's sick, and then you also pick up their cold. Now it becomes a super virus. Okay, this is the type of very nature of a lot of the people who are falling into the tafarruq.
Mm-hmm.
And they are caught up and they're swayed by it because of this very issue. And on top of that, the compound that is, as we were already talking about, the culture. Because everyone has culture, regardless of that culture. And I remember a long time ago, I heard the ulama, they said that the people here, our culture is music. Subhanallah azim. And I laughed to keep from crying because it's not funny and it's sad. But however, because of the cultural ills that the people have and them bringing it into the way we're practicing Islam, you can on any given Sunday, you can see two brothers at the masjid who have an issue with one another, and instead of giving salam, when one may give salams, the other one may not return it. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but if that brother got sick and was in the hospital and everyone was saying, let's go visit the brother, he would be the brother that would say, "La, I ain't going to see that dude. I don't mess with that dude."
Let me ask you this question from those examples that you just brought up. Do you believe that if a person was made to see that those types of positions that they were taking is actually taking them away from Allah's mercy and forgiveness and bringing himself closer to Allah's punishment, that he would continue to behave like that? Or that he would change and act according to what's going to bring him closer to Allah?
To answer your question straight up, it depends on that person's knowledge and awareness of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded him with and forbade him from. Because actions of the people, and not in every case and circumstance, but in a lot of situations, it is tied to the amount of knowledge and understanding that they have. Because you have some of the people who have knowledge, but that knowledge has yet to seep into their heart. So therefore, they can't implement it upon their limbs. So if that very individual, if that was brought to him and he was admonished in that manner, and alhamdulillah, by the permission of Allah, that he has some knowledge and understanding, enough knowledge and understanding, that when he's admonished in that way, that it seeps into his heart and he automatically implements it, and it will take effect. But the individual who lacks, it won't.
But see, the reason why I was asking that is because it goes back to the initial point that I was making when I said that one of the problems is from the ghulu and jahil. I don't know anybody that has entered into Islam to intentionally try and go to the hellfire.
At all.
They're stepping into Islam to flee from the hellfire. And so one of the problems with some of the people that are following these du'at is that their sincerity is being played with. Mm-hmm. They're being convinced that this is the sunnah and this is how you're supposed to move. And I'm saying this because at one point in time, I was like that. We have Sheikh Fareed Abdullah teaching in LA, but we were also, when we went to Saudi, that's when we got connected with certain people who are prominent on the East Coast now in terms of Dawah and a part of that group. And some of these ideas started to seep in. And that's how that's how a lot of stuff made it to the West Coast. And then we had to go through a period where we went through a period of haphazardness, not to the extent of some of the things I see going on in Philly and like this, but it was a period of haphazardness. But Sheikh Fareed weathered that, and eventually, more clarity started to come, especially as it relates to myself, because I remember Fali al-Harbi when I came back into America the first time I went overseas. Fali al-Harbi was the man, right? But it was a lot of that stuff he was teaching I was incorrect, and I remember Fareed correcting me. I can't recall what the issue was, but I said something that I had learned from the brothers who basically learned it from Fali al-Harbi. And he was like, "No, that's incorrect." You know who said that? And I looked Fareed dead in his face. I said, "Fali al-Harbi." He said, "Right, that's incorrect." And he taught me what was correct. You know, so the main point that I'm making is I don't know any brother that accepts Islam, that I'm accepting Islam because I want to go to the hellfire.
Mm-hmm.
So the moves that brothers are making is that are like this is of course what I do is based upon jahil. But what happens is people have such a high regard for some of these teachers, and they're not realizing that some concept that they're teaching you is incorrect. Like that's why I gave the example of Muwaazana.
Mm-hmm.
I had people questioning me about Muwaazana. I had to bring one brother fatwa after fatwa to show him what I was saying was the truth. He just didn't accept what I said. A fatwa Sheikh al-Albani, a fatwa Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen. You know what I'm saying? Sheikh Ahmed Bazmour's breakdown of the fatawa of Sheikh bin Baz on mentioning the good deeds of a person of innovation and with what circumstance and the best for so on. These were things that obviously he had never heard of being in amongst that bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. You know, but then you have some people that are agenda driven. A good example of that would be like Abdul Hafiz of Masjid Mukbil. Abdul Hafiz of Masjid Mukbil was oppressed by those guys. And he told me he had people that he knew for years that knew with certainty that he wasn't saying or doing what they were claiming that he was saying or doing, and they still rode with the program.
Yeah.
They still rode with the program.
And they ain't have the courage to speak up.
Yeah. So the point that I'm making, you know, one, I agree that it depends on the person. Generally speaking, it depends. There's not a monolith. You know, everybody's circumstance and situation is going to slightly differ. But I do believe that there's a lot of brothers that literally think those are the guys that know. They know. They're the ones, you know, and they don't realize how stupid them guys are or ignorant some of the guys are. Really, I mean that. I started to refute that moment, but I said, man, I got old videos on this. You know, I sent them a couple of brothers. Here got my old video. Look at that. Look, watch it from beginning to end. You'll see the fatwa I'm quoting. There's another one, misrepresented what Haddadiyya was. Why do they misrepresent these terms? Because it leaves room for them to be able to point the finger at you when they're falsely accusing you of something.
Right.
So it resembles the truth, but it's not. And for people that actually know what it is, they'd be like, no, that's not it. That's this. You know, that's not this. This is Kether wa Kether. Look at the multitudes of brothers that have been oppressed literally over 9 issues. Literally over 9 issues. judgment call here, perceived mistake over here. You know, a difference of opinion amongst the scholars over here, and like almost trying to tuck the fact that the scholars differ on this issue.
That's what the conflicts are, though. Most of the
and
stuff that's going on now is over ijtihad.
Yeah. I agree. And so, I mean, I'm gonna bring this up. Some people may not like this example, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway. Shadid Muhammad, right? Shadid Muhammad is an example. Now, because I don't keep up with Shadid Muhammad and what he does, like in terms of the speeches that he gives and like this. You know, I don't keep up with him. So I remember one brother saying, "Oh, he just said he did this or he said that or he did this or he said that." And my whole main thing is, if a brother makes a mistake, he makes a mistake. You know, that's for that brother to correct. You know, and we don't make excuses for people that actually make legitimate mistakes. You know, but of course, you know, there's a certain way that we deal and try and remedy the situation, of course. But I don't know Shadid Muhammad personally. I remember meeting him years ago when I was in Saudiya, and he was thinner back then and much more cheerful. It seemed like, you know, but that was one time, you know, and that was years ago. But the point that I'm making, Shadid Muhammad's situation is one of the greatest and most manifest examples of oppression of a brother that I've seen. I mean, there's many brothers that have been oppressed, but I'll give you an example, and this example is going to lead into something else too, right? The whole thing about the Sahaba different in Aqidah, and Shadid even was see a lot even went back to
I was about to say that
about that.
Yeah, I was about
and he said, you know, acknowledged what he said and explained the mas'ala. The reality is, I wrote, man, I think I have a copy of the article up there. I meant to have it. I wrote an article about it. I wrote about a portion of it in my book, and I did a video on it. The reality is, if somebody who's known to be upon the Sunnah makes that statement, it should be understood from this one perspective, and now he's trying to aid the people of innovation to do this, or he's trying to establish that. It should be understood from one way. In Islam, you have Aqidah and Sharia. And in both of these things, there's ijma. In Aqidah and in Sharia. But ijma and the Aqidah is more plentiful than the ijma in Sharia. But in affairs of Aqidah, there are aspects that there is no ijma in. But of course, when it comes to the Sharia, they're more plentiful in the Sharia than they are in the Aqidah. Some of those affairs, I don't know if it could be said that it leads back to companions. But there are some affairs that do. Like, for instance, give me 1 second. This book right here that I just took off the shelf. This book right here, Hadi al-Arwah ila Bilad al-Afrah. Sheikh
Ibn al-Qayyim.
Yeah, he brings in here how some of the companions held the opinion that the hellfire would be extinguished one day. And one of the proofs that was looked at and used was the statement of Allah, "La bithina fiha ahqaba." They will remain therein for ages, not forever, for ages.
Meaning for a long time.
Exactly. Umar, he brings a narration of Umar ibn al-Khattab having that opinion. I believe Abu Huraira and another companion, right? This is 2 volumes. I'm not sure if I grabbed the volume with that discussion in it. Or maybe I did. Let me see. So at any rate, I don't want to turn this into that mess. But the point that I'm making is that's an example. That's an example. Yeah, of course, the majority say otherwise. I'm just using this as an example of differing, right? Because another example is Ali ibn Abi Talib held the opinion that the son of Ibrahim that was going to be sacrificed was Ishaq and not Ismail, right? This is connected to al-Iman bil Rusul, right? This is a companion holding this opinion. This other issue that I just mentioned is an affair connected to al-Iman bil Yawm al-Akhir, bil Yawm al-Akhirah. Excuse me. So these are affairs of Aqidah, but in the Aqidah, again, the ijma is more plentiful than is more plentiful than in Sharia. And every time I dealt with this situation, I quoted Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen every time, right? And I have the article. I gave this article to a brother who was in LA who was starting to be affected. One of the young brothers that was starting to be affected by the ghulu of some of these guys. And this is one of the issues that came up. So I was able to give him this article. But Sheikh Muhammad ibn, this is why I have a copy of it. But here's a translated statement of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, right? Excuse me, let me go back one. Sheikh Uthaymeen states, and this is, again, translated into English, the physical related religious affairs, e.g. ablution, prayer, zakat, fasting, a pilgrimage, etc., blind following therein is allowed by agreement of the scholars. Moreover, it is not possible for a person to oblige the people with exerting efforts, yani ijtihad, in this regard, because ijtihad is difficult, along with the common people being unable to read the books of Islamic jurisprudence. As for the affairs of creed, in which it is obligatory for a person to have certainty therein, the scholars differ. Is blind following permissible with respect to it, or is pursuit of the evidence a must? There's no doubt that pursuit of the evidence is foremost, even in physical related religious affairs, on account that if a man were to build his creed and actions on the evidence, he feels a sense of ease and he knows that he's walking the correct path. However, if the pursuit of evidence is not possible, then blind following in this regard is where the people of knowledge differ. Among them is he who says that it is sufficient, while others state that it isn't. The reality is that it is not possible for us to say that every affair of creed there is unwavering certainty. He states, this is because among the affairs of creed, there is that which the scholars differ. And whatsoever has within it differing among the people of knowledge, it is not invariably certain, because certainty is not possible to ever be negated. For example, the torment of the grave. Does it befall the body or the soul? Additionally, the scholars differ with regards to what is weighed. Is it the actions, the scrolls, or he who implemented actions? Likewise, the scholars differ with regards to the garden in which Adam was lodged. Was it the everlasting garden, yani paradise, or a garden in this world, in this dunya? Moreover, they differ as relates to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam seeing his Lord. Did he see Allah with his eyes or with his heart? They differ with respect to the hellfire. Is it eternal or temporal? All of these affairs are from the creed. So the statement that there is no differing in the creed unrestrictedly is incorrect. Consequently, there is among the affairs of creed that which a person enacts by way of plausible supposition. Another statement of his. All of these statements are coming from al-Aqidah as-Safariniyya, his explanation to this book. The Sheikh also said, the affairs of creed, there's not in all of it a must to have certainty, due to certainty or supposition being dependent on the impact of evidence. And the impact of evidence is according to the comprehension of the person and his knowledge. Thus, two different proofs can be contentious to a person, whereas with another there is no contention, because it becomes clear to him that this evidence has its perspective, whereas this other evidence has its perspective. Hence, the example of the last person, there is no complexity. Instead, with him is certainty, whereas the first person has difficulty. If he views one of the two sides to be more probable, he only preferred it by way of preponderant presumption. On account of this, it is not possible for us to say that every affair in creed makes necessary, with regards to it, unwavering assurance, and that there is no differing as relates to it, because the factual contradicts that. So within the affairs of creed, there are differences, and within it is that which a person is unable to be certain of. However, with him, there's a strong inclination or probability towards what is assumed to be correct. Now, I'm gonna give an example, and this is the sad. First and foremost, Mushadi Muhammad made the statement about the Sahaba different. This is what he meant. What Sheikh Uthaymeen is saying, because in the context of the initial statement, years later, the full statement was brought to me. What he said, he was admonishing the brothers for falling into differing over fiqh issues, and he made mention the Sahaba different in Aqidah, and they didn't deal with each other like this, But he wasn't necessarily talking about, that wasn't the subject. He was trying to diffuse the way some brothers were behaving over, maybe, huh?
Ijtihad.
Yeah, but as it relates to Sharia, though,
Right.
where it's more plentiful in. And so if you hear a Sunni make a statement like this, there should be some husna dhan given to him. He must mean that. Obviously, this is what he means, these things. So it's either one of two things. Either the brothers that pounce on them were ignorant of this, or they were disingenuous. They knew about this, and then they were intentionally being disingenuous because there was an agenda. All right. So the point that I'm making is, even when I first, and I never really put two and two together when I first started learning about some of these affairs, but we always heard about the difference. And I'm not saying these go back to the scholars, to the companions, but they are with our scholars. We've always heard about the difference of opinion on if Dhul Qarnayn was a prophet or not, if Khidr was a prophet or not, if the brothers of Yusuf were prophets or not. We've always heard about this difference of opinion. This is directly connected to al-Iman bil-Rusul. You know, and so like one of the brothers is saying, the aspects of where there's ijma in, which is plentiful, these are considered the usul of the deen. These are considered the usul of the deen. That which there is ijma in as it relates to the Sharia and the Aqidah. These are considered the usul of the religion. So, you know, this is what I mean when I say that trust was given in people. You know, it was looked at like they're the defenders and this and that. And the reality is affairs were handled improperly. It could have been based off their ignorance or just being disingenuous. But it contributed to the current state that we have now with all these with these divisions. Another thing about the Salafia is not a card that'll get you into paradise. There was a violation of ad-dalala al-hamliya, looking at what he said before and what he said after that, to contextualize what he meant by that. Here's the bottom line. If you're a person that claims to be Salafi and you a serial adulterer or a serial fornicator, just because you say you Salafi, that's no guarantee that you get in paradise by being a serial fornicator or serial adulterer. And that's what he meant. I don't recall the exact wordings that he used, but that's what he meant when he made that statement. Okay. You claiming to be Salafi, you're only protected from a particular threat of the fire from that iftiraq that's in that hadith. That's what you're protected from by being Salafi. But you're not protected from the threats that are connected to these other sins.
Mm-hmm.
So get yourself together. Get yourself together. And so the point that I'm making is that situation back then is an indication. It was a travesty. It was, you know, I'm not saying, and this was at a time because I had brothers in Saudi getting at me, telling me, this brother is trying to rectify, he was trying to rectify the problems that was going on between him and some of the brothers over there. So a person is coming and trying to be, being remorseful or trying to bring about some type of reconciliation, and you behave with him in a manner like that. No, so I'm only using his example as an example of clear oppression. That when that was done to him, a lot of people woke up. A lot of people was like, well, hold up, something ain't right. Something's not going on. Something's not correct here. You know. And so
Assalamu alaikum.
So I
wanted to know another question that I have. Why isn't more talabatul ilm speaking against the lack of this behavior? Like, alhamdulillah, something that you are doing. I wish there were more people doing the same thing, you know?
Well, here's my deal. This is tonight. What I'm doing is just a special presentation. But the reality is, when it comes to Ashabul Ghulu, they're in a bubble
by themselves.
And my thing would be leave them in that bubble. I think that is I don't even pay attention to them guys unless somebody brings me something that they're doing, and unless that happens, I wouldn't even know what they're doing. And this is one of the reasons why I said in the beginning that Salafi du'at, or people claiming to be Salafi, we don't have really influence over the general masses of the Muslims. They don't. Those guys don't. None of the brothers do. You know, They'll only have influence once if you're paying attention to the bubble.
Or the
And if you want to,
or their followers.
the bubble, that's the
Right.
bubble. Yeah. But once you divorce yourself from that bubble, you won't hear nothing from them.
Mm-hmm.
Once you remove yourself from the bubble, don't follow none of them on Twitter. Don't follow, don't keep up with them. Instagram. Don't keep up with none of that. Every time lately, if something happens that some people feel like it's noteworthy to send to me, I hear about it from other people. And but I'm not. They don't come up on none of my feeds. From YouTube to Instagram to X, they don't come up on nothing. I'm so
but then
yeah, so
pay attention to that stuff.
yeah, and I would just say, when it comes to other du'at that are striving upon Salafiyah, but they just, I'm sick of the fitna. I'm just gonna. I got my master. I'm gonna teach. For brothers like that who you have who people have a good relations with, just always being an encouragement to, for those brothers to to resolve whatever ongoing issues that may be between some of their brothers. I mean, it takes a rare character of a person to apologize to a brother, even though they know that the brother was the one that wronged them. But they do it strictly for the sake of restoring the brotherhood.
If I may add, I also want to give a lot of credit to Sheikh Abdul Hafid, Imam of Masjid Muqbil. Alhamdulillah, I feel like in his khutbah, mashallah, the Sheikh, mashallah, is very precise in, alhamdulillah, warning against those nonsense. And that's something I really appreciate. And likewise, yourself, Ustad Najeeb, barakallahu fiqh, ma'as Allah Azza wa Jalla to catch you brothers. Hafidhakumullah wa ra'akum.
Yeah, I mean.
In fact, I need to get. I haven't. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I haven't talked to Abdul Hafid in a while. I need to give him a call, inshallah. Well, anyway, there's a whole lot more that could be said, but this is going into 3 hours and 40 minutes. I'm gonna sign out. Hopefully, everything that I mentioned was clear and it wasn't a source of confusion for anybody. Aziz, I see you in the chat. Anything I said a source of confusion? Gotta wait for him to respond if he's still watching, right? But anyway,
no, but to answer your question, it wasn't. Nothing was a source of confusion. Being the
Alhamdulillah, it was a great dialogue. Like you said, it could have been a lot more said, but we get everything was said. Alhamdulillah. And,
it's so much going on. It's not enough. We really don't have enough time to really,
Right.
The main point is, brothers, just be a part of the solution. Don't be a part of the problem.
Right, absolutely.
Be a part of the solution. Is sometimes, man, listen, we gotta get out of the mentality. We gotta get out of the mentality that it gotta be some type of special leader that do stuff. Listen, man, if you got sometimes it just takes, okay, I heard so-and-so got an issue with Najeeb. Let me connect him with Najeeb so they could talk. Just be something. Sometimes it just be as simple as that. It don't have, sometimes the men in the fences, it could basically be a one-on-one type situation. The next thing you know, if that continues, next thing you know, these different splinters, that there won't be anything between them. You have a lot of times, and I've noticed this. People, everybody's human. Everybody's going to make human mistakes, but people assume that a person did A, B, C, D, or E, or meant A, B, C, D, or E when they did something. And even brothers that's involved in Dawah could fall into the problem of not verifying or Yeah, not verifying, not calling a person up themselves, saying, well, what was up with this? I didn't understand that move you made or that industrial facade. Could you explain this to me? And next thing you know, they're going around talking about they don't feel comfortable with this one or that one, but their position is based off assumption. And sometimes
else. Yeah.
No, it's just based off assumption. It's based off how they're perceiving how a person moved. And what they should have done was called to find out, okay, what was going on. Instead, They took another position. But sometimes you could be that third person that'd be like, no, brother, he didn't mean that. He meant this. He really intended that when he said that. I know because I talked to him. And that right there could be the thing that causes a person to back away from a position that they may have taken against a brother.
But a lot of times, a lot of people, they be so influenced and so starched on following a particular, so they don't want to hear.
I'm talking about I'm talking about du'at right now.
Yeah, I know, but and if their followers or even the people that's kind of like geared towards them or have somewhat of an inclination towards them, they don't want to hear nothing that you got to say because they mind is already set on following them. So if you say, say for instance, for example, you listen to a particular du'at that they don't listen to, but they say, so and so got issues, you should stay away from that person or whatever. So, but you will say, you will give them some clarity or what the person meant or said or something like that. You're like, nah, that ain't what I heard. I heard, brother so and so said this, that, and the third, without them actually hearing from that person himself. So they don't want to hear that mistake that person. You don't want to hear no clarification. They running off of what those du'at say. You get what I'm saying?
So are we giving another example about the guys in the bubble, or because we need to be ignoring them, right?
Yeah, that's yeah.
So I don't expect no more examples with people in the bubble, that inform some type of hizb or something. I'm not expecting examples like that. I am talking about the brothers who are legitimately upon the methodology. They're Salafi because they traverse upon the methodology. They're not wearing Salafia like a brand. My brand is Salafi bookstore and Salafi salt shaker and Salafi coffee and Salafi. We ain't talking about none of that. We're talking about people who traverse upon this methodology. Those type of brothers are going to be stepping to the plate with a different mentality, inshallah. But the person who just Salafi sneakers, Salafi thobe, Salafi t-shirt, Salafi kufi, man, who cares about them? At this point, it really has to be a situation where people say, listen, I'm divorcing myself from that. Those people over there, they're marginalizing themselves. Even right now, they're having problems with. I've gotten word from other brothers about them having problems with Musa Richardson and Mughrabi now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all it's going. That's all they're ever going to be. That's all they're ever going to be is destructive.
Problems.
That's all they're ever going to be. 2 years from now, it'll be somebody else. It may be Mustafa George. He ain't down enough. Or maybe Rashid Barbie. He ain't down enough.
Mm-hmm.
The rock bottom line is, them guys, man, it's really not trying to achieve any type of rectification with those guys. Look, if these are the same guys that's running around here talking about Mashiach,
yeah,
talking about ulama, people who've been established to be scholars for years.
Yeah.
Look at Sheikh their opinions of Sheikh Suleiman al-Ruhaili. Sheikh Ahmed Bazmou, all these people, Sheikh Mohammed Bazmou and all these people. Sheikh Mohammed Sayyid Aslan.
They don't take
they have opinions and then they still teach from their books.
Exactly. I was about to say that. They don't.
So, yeah. Well, I wouldn't know. I don't keep up with them.
I mean, I don't listen. Neither do I, right? And honestly, ever since alhamdulillah, I had, I was fortunate enough to actually to read and study from Qawaid al-Salafiyya, which is by Sheikh Ahmed Bazmul. since I was able to do that, I was able to separate myself from the foolishness, you know, and to identify what was and what wasn't. And all of my opinions of individuals whom, like, whatever opinions I formed prior to reading that book, I had to do away with them. I had to do away with them, and I had to basically, you know, I literally had to take some time and contemplate on what was taught to me, you know, and just reevaluate it, you know. And alhamdulillah that I was able to do that, because I literally, when I came out on the other side of that, I really started seeing things way differently and for what they really were. I even had a bad experience, right? SubhanAllah, this is not funny. I really laughed to keep from crying. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's so hurtful, man. It's so hurtful to see. Wallahi al-Azim, akhi. At one time, man, it was such a beautiful thing in the city, you know, to especially when we was having a muhadarat, you know, and all the brothers was coming from all over. You had people who was coming here from different cities, and you know, they was coming here because their love and what they heard about Salafiyya and the Salafi community. You know what I mean? And subhanAllah, akhi, literally, that was in like 2000, the early 2000s. It was so beautiful, man. But now it's chaos. It's chaos, and it's so bad. I went to Masjid bin Baz, right? And the brother, he accused me, first and foremost. He accused me of refuting the masjid, which I never done, right? And I didn't even refute anybody specifically, period. I refuted actions that were done. I refuted actions, and that was that. And of course, I named some of the people who were tied to those actions. But however, my intent wasn't to draw attention to them. It was to draw attention to the actions, and that's why I didn't mention their name repeatedly. Those who knew who they were, those who knew what the actions were, you know, it went without saying. But for those who didn't, I didn't want to be a person who says something and then be accused of not naming my people or not speaking actual facts. So at the end of the day, that's why I did what I did. But I did it on WhatsApp, and I invited several individuals, or whatever the case was. It was very important to do that because of what's going on, like we're talking about the state of the community right now. So as I was bringing principles of Salafiyya to the people to explain to them why this situation should not have played out like that, and why you need to safeguard yourself from this situation, and why you need to reflect upon what you're doing and what you're perceiving from what you're seeing. And after doing all of that, when I went to Masjid bin Baz, it was said to me that I refuted the masjid, and then I was accused of refuting an individual. And, you know, it was other things that were said. But listen, the worst part of all, right? The worst part of all is when I came, I went there for Maghrib. And so all this happened after we prayed Salat al-Maghrib. You know, the Imam, he refused to teach his class that he have after Maghrib unless I exit from the masjid.
Wow.
Unless I exit from the masjid. So instead of oppressing the brothers who came to sit, and they was going over Shahr al-Ajrumiyya. But however, I said, listen, I'm not going to oppress the people. So I left. And I waited in the car, came back for Salat al-Isha. Right? And it was said to me as I'm praying my 2 rak'ah, right? Get out of the masjid. Well, I don't see why you keep coming here. Get out of the masjid. And on top of that, called me shaitan. A'udhu billahi min.
SubhanAllah.
Allahumma stan. Nasallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Ameen.
Anyway, man, let me close out, man, because it's getting late, and I have to be up before Fajr. You know, for Wafakakumullah. I appreciate the brothers participating in this discussion. I definitely didn't want it to go this long, but alhamdulillah. With that, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.